OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right. You're very welcome along. It is Tuesday morning. Is it Tuesday or Wednesday morning?
It's Tuesday the
morning.
15th of March,
Tuesday
2022.
the 15th of March. It is because, sure, doesn't Cheltenham start today? We haven't missed anything just yet. As it stands, every docket's a winner. Every single one of us has money in our pockets.
You thought for a moment there that you'd forgot to wake up in a cold sweat and be like, shite, I forgot to put my bets down.
Are you getting involved?
I tend to. I haven't really for the last couple of years, working from home and all that. I kind of like the communal nature of it all. I'm such a bandwagoner.
The filth of the bookie shop.
It's like, I just want to feel something.
The cigarette kind of slowly burning your fingers as you're like watching the race.
Yeah,
You've forgotten
exactly.
that you had it.
Just standing there, just feeling at one with the world.
A couple of inches of ash slowly nicotining, yellowing those fingers.
Yeah, my fingernails slowly turning
Your butt
dark.
crack miraculously appearing out of nowhere. That's what happens. You slowly morph into one of the doyens of the bookie shop.
Yeah. I want to spend my days for the next 4 days in a kind of grimy pub with a 5 metre walk to bookies. That's what I want my existence to be.
I don't want to come across like this is not going to sound good, but like we didn't need the back-to-back. We didn't need the back-to-back bank holidays this week, did we? We need them later in the year. Like,
Remember, we're going to do something other than
when the
drink
weather
and watch racing.
Exactly. It's like this week's already looked after.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're kind of ruining this for us.
Because there will be more people.
There's just be an expectation that you're going to have to do stuff. It's a bank holiday. Don't waste the bank
Speak for
holiday.
yourself.
I mean, like, what? We weren't wasting the bank holiday. We were sitting watching racing,
Yeah,
having the crack.
it's a very good point.
And now it's like,
yeah.
but everybody has family stuff to do.
Well-
Got to spend time with family. Like, okay.
Some of us don't. Some of us absolutely do not, and will not. It'll just be.
But your friends will expect you to do stuff. You will
Yes.
have an expectation.
Sit in a pub 5 metres away from a bookies is the expectation.
Okay. Well, I mean, you weren't going to do that anyway, though.
Well,
So then you don't get the benefit of the bank holiday.
A bit of work, to be
I mean,
fair.
like, you know.
But then, I mean, you could just head off at 10:30 in the morning and.
Oh, it is work watching the racing.
Yeah, sorry, of course, taking notes with my cap on.
How has the bank holiday? How is it affecting everybody's plans for the extra bank holiday? Because obviously, and look, it's a fluky situation where the Thursday happens to be St. Patrick's Day. Because if the Tuesday was St. Patrick's Day, they wouldn't have given us a second one. Well, they would have given us a Monday, I suppose. But if it was a Wednesday, they wouldn't have. So I guess whatever was happening, they were giving us a second one. I'll shut up now. If you want to get in touch this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. There's the most turgid stream of consciousness you've ever seen.
Bank holiday analysis coming at you fast this morning.
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Let's talk about Chelsea. Let's talk about Liverpool. Let's talk about Man City. Let's talk about whatever you're having. The poor Chelsea team are going to have to travel 10 hours round trip to Middlesbrough. It's almost like they're a football team who have a match to go to. It's like, what? Why? How? Normally they would fly. Now they're going to have to get bus the way almost every sports team in the world travels to events. I realise that air travel has largely replaced it, but there's still a bit where you get on a bus and you go somewhere. It's like not that big a deal. It's 10 hours. 5 hours there, you play a match, 5 hours back, potentially the next day. It ain't that big a deal.
Yeah, supporters have to do it all the time.
Like,
Underage amateur teams have to do it all the time.
they might even have 2 buses. Do you know? There's going to be like plenty of room. There's going to be those buses with the bits where you can lie down if you need to. There'll be a massage table. There'll be like a support staff. They're not really. They are in danger of losing the public when it comes to this stuff. There's also been links of another Saudi businessman with the potential for buying them. So we're going to keep a very close eye on that story. That one's being poo-pooed straight away. It's like, oh, that couldn't possibly happen. But you know what? It could happen. That's exactly what could happen. That's what did happen with Newcastle. And no one gave a fiddler's up until now. So, and the only other story before we actually get into the meat of what's happening is the back page splash and or the front page splash in the sports sections in a lot of the English papers are that they could be tearing down Old Trafford. It's like, oh, they're going to raise it to the ground. And it's like, yeah, and then they're going to build a gleaming new stadium of 90,000 capacity that's going to be one of the best stadiums in the world. It's like, oh, you know, sacking Old Trafford like the invading horde that they are, or modernising it to the point where, you know, it's a much more comfortable and better fan experience.
Which one of those two things is closer to the truth?
I mean, it's probably not going to happen. Is the other thing. It's like there are three options. One is to fix one of the stands and do it slowly. Another is to sack it to the ground, and the other one is to like reanimate the whole thing. And it's like more than likely what they'll do is they will take down Old Trafford, because it's not actually a beautiful old. It's not like Rangers, or it's not like even Villa, which has this kind of awesome red brick stadium. Old Trafford's grand. Like, it's very impressive as stadiums built really in the 90s go in terms of the size, but the view isn't great from everywhere, and it's not particularly comfortable. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, there's no way of building something new that reflects the values of the club. Maybe the only thing that we can do these days is to keep the battered, tattered part of the building and go, oh, that was the old part, and that's more important. It's like,
I think what will probably happen here is that somewhere in the middle will be the end, which will be a redevelopment of a stand.
Shouldn't they just build a new one?
Like, that is one of the things that Andy Midden in particular says when he comes on the show a lot, is that the stadium is in a state of disrepair. It is this emblem of an ageing club, a club that has seen its best days already, and the future doesn't look too bright. So I guess that would be emblematic of a brighter future maybe for Manchester United, but I guess there's a practical level to it as well. Just build yourself a nicer stadium that is worthy of a team that will hopefully, from their perspective, be better over the next little while.
Yeah, and the only thing that they could do while that was happening is they'd probably play in City Stadium, which, controversial enough. At 7:37 this morning, we should talk about the big news last night, and that was that City couldn't score at Palace. Here is Pep Guardiola and what he had to say after a 0-0 draw against Crystal Palace.
Well, we played a really, really good game. Create a lot of chances, especially in the first half. Difficult side, defend really well, tight, and they were with the rhythm. And we played a really good game.
Created so much in the first half. Did you look to try and change anything at half time, or was the message more of the same, please?
No, we will continue the same. So patient, no concede, and we have our chances. We had it, we could not convert. Sometimes happen.
Second half, did you consider making any changes of personnel, or did you always believe that what you had out there would see the job?
They were
would
playing
find
good.
A breakthrough?
Yeah, I thought a lot to make some changes, but they were playing good. The guys were inside, have the ability to score a goal. But at the end we play more with emotion, they defend and with their people. But I think they were playing good.
You're pleased with the performance. Was it difficult to feel anything other than disappointment given where we are in the season and the fact that you dominated the game tonight?
We played to win the game, so we create more, we concede few. The stats are there. The way we played was amazing in the difficult stadium with the grass not perfect, and we were there all the time without the ball, so we did a good game.
Yeah, but the grass was unsuitable for the game. They're all covered in grass stains afterwards. It wasn't like they didn't try, but they made no subs. What's the point in having the biggest squad in world football if you make no subs?
Yeah, it is strange. That's certainly one of the talking points from last night. Like, so their attacking substitutions that were on the bench were Raheem Sterling and Gabriel Jesus. So on top of that, I guess you could have brought Ilkay Gundogan in to change things in midfield. But the thing is that Manchester City were playing very, very well, and it looked like they were going to get a winner. They hit the post a couple of times. The Joao Cancelo effort, which smacked the post, I think, goes right in at number one in terms of the most hourly satisfying post connections with a ball of all time. It was beautiful. I'm not sure is the microphone position at Selhurst Park in the optimum place, or whether or not it was just the strike of the ball was so good. But Selhurst Park obviously is a place where title dreams tend to go to die, and Manchester City experienced that last night, and the ball isn't back in Liverpool's court just yet, but they've got a serious leg up at this point. They always beat Arsenal, except for that one weird time when it didn't happen during COVID in an empty stadium, and they were a better team than Arsenal, and they tend to get the job done against Arsenal. So after Wednesday night, there is a good chance they'll be in a very, very good position not going into the game, but with one eye on that game against Manchester City at the start of next month.
You're not, as an Arsenal fan, trying to yell Liverpool there, are you? Is that what's happening?
I'm just gazing into my crystal ball and telling you what's going to happen.
Okay, your crystal balls have been very accurate in the past as well.
Yeah.
So that was the story with that, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. If you're a Liverpool fan, you're very happy this morning, we'd like to hear from you. If you're a City fan, you're starting to get worried, we'd like to hear from you. If you're a Man United fan, Pochettino and Harry Kane are going to come as a package. We'll talk about that with Samuel Luckhurst a little bit later on. We do know that he's not a one-man team, though. And, like, how are you gonna pay for this? Because I guess, I don't know, maybe somebody will buy all those expensive players. You won't be paying the salary of all those players. You're letting it go for free in the summertime. So anyway,
they operate a just in case policy, I think. Just in case Jesse Lingard becomes messy, you just got to keep him just in case. And the same with all those. Same with Marcus Rashford. Just in case he becomes the Marcus Rashford of all, you got to keep these assets.
Very quickly, the League of Ireland last night. Rovers dropped 2 more points. Sligo Rovers beat Finn Harps 3-1. Joseph N'Doe was on co-coms, which I think is going to happen more and more. Here he is calling the first of Aidan Kennan's 3 goals last night. Sligo Rovers. How about you?
Morgan and McWoods plays it straight to McDonnell. Fitzgerald plays it back for Keane. Keane is going to go for goal.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to heaven.
This is exactly what the League of Ireland needs. So it's actually been great for the title race. That you have a few surprise packages. None of the teams with the money are running away with it just yet. Some of the teams that we expect to be in transition aren't actually in transition. They're just good. So we'll get stuck into that a little bit later on too. If you're a League of Ireland fan, you've something you want to get off your chest this morning, leave a comment in the YouTube stream. Hit subscribe on YouTube as well. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the GPA. So Tom Ryan has written to all of the county boards. Maybe he writes to provincial councils, I don't know. But he has written anyway about their side of the story. And their side of the story has merit. The GPA side of the story has merit. And it's bizarre that they can't find a solution to this. That's what strikes me from this, is that like the top people from the GAA and the GPA have been sitting in a room for ages, and the actual solution has not been arrived at. We've reached some kind of point of brinkmanship.
Yeah. Tom Parsons, I think, was pretty exercised last night on the show about how simple the solution is here, that lads don't want to be out of pocket going training, which is a point. It's not even worth saying that it has merit. Of course it has merit. And then the GAA are saying, well, we don't want to be having more than 4 instances of sessions during a week, which also has merit. But there is a middle ground here where, the GPA, the players themselves, aren't the ones who are playing if if factors from the ESRI report from a few years ago are being avoided and not being taken any heed of, that managers are asking players to come train 4 times and then train or then play a match on top of that during the week. It's not necessarily the players' fault if that's the case, and they seem to be the ones who are paying for it at the moment, literally paying for it. So it's this sort of grey area in the middle, which isn't that far away from where both parties lie, and you'd think that the situation could be fixed. But I wonder, will the county boards and the powers that operate in every county have to intervene here and say, listen, we'll either pay up the remaining money or have some sort of commitment that 4 will be the limit. 4 sessions will be the limit. So
the 4 sessions limit is coming from the ESRI report, and both parties, the GA and the GPA, are quoting the ESRI report as lies down lies and statistics. The devil can quote scriptures for its own purposes. They're both saying, well, this bolsters my argument. And like, I think there is a case for limiting the number of sessions that teams are doing. But if teams breach that, there needs to be repercussions for it. And at the moment, what the GA is saying, the repercussions are going to be borne by the counties, and the counties are saying, no, we're not going to do it. But the GPA don't negotiate with each individual county, because how could you do that? There's it would be the Wild West. So they negotiate centrally, which is fair enough. That's the whole point of collective bargaining, is that you don't go off as a union to each individual employer and go, okay, it's like we as a union are saying, these are our standards, you meet them, and we're organising to have a conversation with the central body. So the GAA needs to get the county boards in line and say, stop having more than 4 sessions, and if you go over the 4 sessions, you're going to have to pay, right? Mm-hmm. That would knock it on the head pretty quickly. At the centre of this is arrogant managers who know better than everybody else about what is needed, right? Because if the manager says, I need you to play 2 games in 1 day, or if the manager says, I need you to train 5 times a week this week just to show me you're a man, then What choice do you have if you want to play for your county but to do it? So there are still loads of those arrogant managers who are stupid in positions of power within the organisation, and that's the problem.
Your solution there makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in one level, because what it would require is a hell of a lot of honesty, which doesn't exist. The entire premise of intercounty GAA is based on an element of dishonesty and an element of, being like, oh, we're doing X when actually we're doing Y in terms of training, in terms of the workload. Everything is kind of kept hush-hush. And especially when it comes to finances in the GAA, that has certainly got a lot of connotations, which means, money under the table or whatever it may be. This is over the table, this is legal, this is expenses that can be paid in a legitimate way. And if people are straight up about it and front up to the idea that they are training 5 times a week or whatever the number is, then just be honest about it and just say, listen, this is what we're doing, and somebody needs to pay the players that. Because one of the problems here is that counties are saying, well, sure, we are training only 4 times a week, or we're training 3 times a week in a match, and in reality there's a couple of secret sessions going on here and there. Like, we saw this during COVID, and the amount of questions we still have about who was training during COVID, we still don't know the full story, and we never will know the full story. That's just symptomatic of the way the GAA operates.
It's clear that loads of teams got away with training during COVID.
100%.
And that's one of the difficulties here, because what you could do is you could just say to the players, you just tell us your owed expenses, your owed money for showing up to training tonight. You just make sure that we know about it.
That's treason. You're then stabbing your county manager in the back by telling on him, telling the GPA on him.
So the county board are going to tell, which is going to ultimately result in a fine for them?
I don't know.
So the trouble here is what's happened is that the players are ultimately being made to be responsible.
Yes.
And that's the difficulty.
Yeah.
It's the county boards and the managers' faults, and the GAA is pushing back to the county board saying, you sort this out locally, we'll pay for the 4 sessions because that's what we should do. And the point is that it will be bad practice to pay for more. There's a certain element of that is very understandable, but just how you're going about this is like, sort this out, Tom, you sort this out, which doesn't really work.
No, and I suspect as well that Tom Ryan isn't exactly...
and Tom Parsons there, sorry, instead of Tom Ryan. Yeah.
Well, there's 2 Toms going head to head here, and I think Tom Ryan... I'd say is a very strong negotiator as well. He obviously comes from his financial background, and he knows the value of this to the GAA. I'm not sure how well the argument that Tom Parsons is putting forward about the GAA being flush with money actually washes with Tom Ryan, because he might argue, well, listen, we can pump it into other areas if the county board want to come up with the money to pay for the extra sessions.
Well, the county board should, and if they can't, then you can't train. So you can only spend what you earn, County Board X. You can't run up these massive deficits. We're not going to bail you out anymore the way we have with all your white elephant county grounds and bad training places. Those days are over.
But then the very legitimate retort to that is, what about Kerry Group and AIG and the way that they're able to funnel money into your county board, and all of a sudden a county sponsored by Kerry Group or AIG have a massive leg up on their counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, you're still stuck to your 4 training sessions a week though. Like, it works. It's very hard to compare anything with the NFL, obviously, because you're talking about billions and billions, and the NFL is essentially a cartel. But it works where there's a limit of contact hours. The Players Union just says the Ravens trained an extra time, they had contact session, and the Ravens lose a draft pick, and it's like, okay, well, probably we will definitely think about doing that again.
Yeah,
there's a repercussion for it. So if you trained 5 times one week and didn't pay your expenses, or if you trained 5 times one week at all, you're losing. You're starting next season's league campaign minus 2 points.
Look, again, I think that's a good idea, but you know what the reaction to that will be is like, okay, we're not training, and I'm just plucking this out of thin air. I'm not saying that Kerry are doing this, but instead of training in Killarney, you're going down to South Kerry, or you're going down to some other pitch that nobody has eyes on for your 5th training session a week, and that goes for every other county.
So the players aren't getting paid for that, and they're saying, no, we're not doing it.
But then the county board, with the flush money from the big sponsor, pay for it, and that's the way it goes.
Well, then at least somebody's paying for it.
Yeah, and that's what the solution is here, or that's what needs to happen here in the end. Somebody needs to pay for the extra training sessions that are clearly happening, and fronting up about what the reality is probably the first step here.
Yeah, there's a good long track record of fronting up about the reality, isn't there? 7:50 this morning here on OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. I'm going to bring you the power rankings. We've got Donal O'Neill, ex-GPA, joining us just after 8 o'clock this morning, talking about the historical beef between Pádraig Joyce and the GPA. Rugby with Mike Ross, the dark arts of the front row in particular, coming your way at 8:20 this morning. Samuel Luckhurst is going to join us at 8:50 to talk about the Manchester United situation. ahead of the Champions League. And then John Duggan is at Cheltenham to mark your card. We'll go race by race through today. Honeysuckle is obviously the big star of the day, and all the back pages of the English papers are awash with Honeysuckle and the power of Irish racing and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get John's take on that as well. But now at 7:50, it is time for the power rankings.
Some of these critics, these pundits,
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
that like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just dismiss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
Do you remember last year when we were having this debate about the league and this possibility that the league could be taken from its home in the sort of depths of like Winterfell-esque conditions and paste it into something like the southern reaches of Westeros and the nice sunny climes of summertime? Remember that conversation?
Yeah.
That was nice, but of course there was a lot of arguments against that. Proposal B is what we're talking about here. One of those reasons, one of those very strong arguments that was put out there was that we can't have the league in the summer because of dead rubbers. The rubber that is dead is not a good thing for any competition, because of course there are plenty of them in Gaelic games, and
it'd be this stage of the
we're into the business end. I mean,
6 and 7 rounds,
yeah.
6 and 7 of the league will be full of dead rubbers, which will be meaningless games that no one will want to go and see, and you will not get full county grounds. You will not have carnivals of football right around the country on a Saturday and Sunday. That will definitely not happen. You will not have meaningful football played in good conditions where relegation and promotion are on the line for almost every county in the country.
No, the rubber is dead, you see, and that's a shame, and nobody will turn out. Except we have this strange situation this year where you look at the league tables. It's not a strange situation, this is the case every year, where no one has made a league final yet. No one has been relegated. In honesty, this is a little bit extreme, but it's not that extreme. I did the sums last year. Dead rubbers aren't that common in the National League. It's a very rare occurrence, but this has been a particularly good instance of it.
But Eoin, what about those teams who won't be playing for Sam Maguire? What about those teams? Their seasons are over. They have nothing to play for, Eoin. What about those teams?
That's the interesting argument now, is that Dublin would be playing for their right in the Sam Maguire at the moment, which is an interesting one, but considering they've been doing that in this alternate universe, they would have been doing that for the last few weeks anyway. And I think
so
I dare say things would have probably gone a little.
How many people are showing up to Croke Park? So let's say it's like mid-May, right? Let's say this is when it should be. It should be mid-May. Who are those playing next?
Their last two games are Donegal and Monaghan. I'm not quite sure what the order is.
And so one of those games is in Croker, and a chance to play in an All-Ireland last 16 is on the line.
Yeah.
Are you telling me you're not getting 45,000 at that? No, you're going to get 20,000 max. That's all that we're only able to. There's no financial involvement. This is not going to have any bearing on anything. And
so they've played 5 games at the moment, five league games, like 5 championship games is what that would have been, and that's possibly more than they will need to play this year to get to an All-Ireland semi-final or get to an All-Ireland final, even though they come through the biggest province. But anyway, the league is good, is the bottom line here, and these final couple of weeks are set up for an unbelievable finish. But that it was ever thus with the National League. Over the last 10 years, it has been excellent. Like kind of like the permutations that develop on the final day, they'll start to develop this weekend as we go into the proper business end of this year's National League. And of course, there's massive consequence in relation to into the Championship when it comes to those Division 2 and Division 3 teams especially. So at 32, a non-mover in Waterford. 31 is Carlow. 30 is Wicklow. They all lost at the weekend. Wexford, they lost last week in their rescheduled game to Tip, but they got a win at the weekend to beat Waterford by a point. They were at number 29. London, the bubble seems to have burst a little bit on the London Rising. They're down to 28. They took a massive beating at the hands of Sligo at the weekend. 27 is Leitrim. They're staying put there. They beat Carlow at the weekend, and Sligo are down to 26. I'll explain that in a minute because there's a big riser in the mid-20s at the moment. Longford are down to 25. They took a pretty heavy beating to Antrim after beating Westmeath the previous week, which looked like a significant result for this Longford team. Kind of feels like a step forward and a step backward over the last fortnight for that team. 24 is Fermanagh. They lost to Louth, and then that big riser, as I mentioned, is Tipperary. They're up to 23. Could have possibly got a bigger bounce, did consider bringing them into the top 20. I just want to kind of see how things go over the next little while. They beat Cavan at the weekend, if you missed it. They beat them by 4 points. A huge win for them, because it did look, after that early start to the season where they drew at Waterford and then got beaten by 8 points, let's not forget, by Leitrim, it looked like Tipperary could be stuck in Division 4 for another year. But that win against Sligo was a huge one, and then beating Cavan, which they kind of needed to do, I feel, really puts them into that promotion picture. So a few more wins and they'll definitely be into the top 20 again. Really turn things around at the moment, it seems. Tipperary. Antrim, as I say, big win against Longford. They're in at 22. Limerick staying put at 21. Cork, one of the big fallers this week, down to 20, lost to Meath by 8 points. So it's Roscommon by 6 points, a draw with Clare, Derry by 9 points, Galway by 8 points, Meath by 8 points. There's a pattern emerging here where Cork just aren't good enough to contend with the top teams in Division 2 at the moment, and they are, I think at this point, a yo-yo team between Division 2 and 3 for however long we see this league going. In a couple of years' time, they will be, they'll make their place back in the top couple of the divisions, but right now, that's where they are. Laois are up to 19th. They beat Wicklow at the weekend, and Louth, they've been very impressive throughout this league campaign. Mickey Hart potentially finally getting his fingerprints in this team. They're into 18. Down, produced egg and rubbed it in all of our faces from the quick picks last Friday. We all predicted they would beat Offaly in Newry, to be fair, on Saturday, but they got beaten by Offaly. A great late comeback from Offaly to beat them by a point. So Down are down to 17th. Cavan are down to 16th, not being punished too much by that defeat to Tip at the weekend. And Westmeath are up to 15th after their win against Limerick, are responding well after the defeat to Longford the previous week. Offaly then, as I say, that win against Down has brought them up to 14th, and then Clare in at 13. Meath, I've put them back up to 12th.
They can't be ahead of Clare, can they?
They're not ahead of Clare on the league table as far as I'm aware, but I think, are they on the same points? They've yet to play each other.
Right.
They've yet to play each other, so I guess I'm probably nailing my colours to the mast on that one. I do think the last couple of games have shown a better version of Meath. They got trounced by Galway on the opening day of the league, but they just stopped the rot against Down and Offaly and then got a big win against Cork.
Yeah, the one thing is that their shot selection and their shot percentage was really low, but they were clearly creating chances, unless they were all pot shots from 60 yards, which they weren't. It was just kicking really bad wides. And so if that regresses to the mean, they'll start putting up bigger scores, which will give them an opportunity to win. So, early season panic over, a few wins. The last 2 league games, that's what you want to be bouncing into your championship, particularly this year. So,
yeah, I definitely think things are a lot more positive in the context of Meath. After the weekend, you can't say we saw amazing signs against Down and Offaly. They should be beating Down and Offaly in all things being equal, and they only got draws against them. But I think that win at the weekend feels like a little bit of a kickstart. I'm not saying they're going to win the Leinster Championship or anything like that, but they're not going to get relegated from Division 2 if I was calling it now, which is probably better than we could have said a couple of weeks ago. Roscommon stay put at 11th. They drew with Derry, who are in at 10th. Look how that happens. 11 plays 10 and they end up drawing in the National League. It's almost as if these are the most perfect, flawless power rankings ever. Derry begin our top 10. Do you see that Shane McGuigan red card at the end of the game? That was absolute madness. I've never seen a player more angry in my life on a GAA pitch, and he was dead right to be angry. It was one of those moments where he was on a yellow card. The first yellow card was a bit of a joke, and he was attacking, and naturally the Roscommon man was holding him back, but the referee booked him instead, because of course he would be holding his man back to hold up his attack to go and get the winner. And he took his gloves off and he slammed them to the ground, and he was fuming, and rightly so. And because he wasn't on the pitch then, he didn't get the last minute free to win the game for Derry, and they missed it, and it ended up being a draw. So Derry
are still getting punished for not taking a pot shot at the end of last year's championship game. It's like referees oh, you're just going to play this out now. We know what you're like.
Possibly. It's interesting, I think, how highly we now rate this Derry team is that I looked at that result against Roscommon, and maybe it's in the context of them being down a lot early in that game. I was thinking, well, they're disappointing results for Derry. Whereas a few years ago, you'd say Roscommon, a yo-yo team between Division 1 and 2, Derry would be doing well to be in that company. Whereas now, it kind of feels like it's a bit of a disappointment that Derry aren't beating Roscommon. But they were just one kick of a ball away from beating them and coming back from behind. And all of a sudden, we're like, right, Derry are grinding results out on top of all of the quality that they're showing. I still back them to get promoted.
Because of our hot takes on the bank holiday situation at the start of the show. We've kind of eaten into the time for this, so we're going to have to fly through this and come back to it in more detail a little bit later.
Galway are in at number 9. They beat Clare by 6 points at the weekend. In the top 8, at number 8 is Kildare, down a couple of places. Donegal down a couple of places into 7th. Monaghan are rising into 6th after their win against Donegal at the weekend. Tyrone are down to 5th. Dublin, one of the biggest risers in the top page there. They're up 3 spots, 2-4. Armagh are in at 3rd. Mayo are in at number 2, and Kerry are still at number 1. So no changes in the top 3.
Okay, so what's the story with the Dubs?
The Dubs, I think that they are back to a certain extent. I mean, if they were back, they would have been in the top 3. Like, a couple of things to keep an eye on from that game at the weekend. I thought that Dublin got torn apart on a couple of occasions early in the season, and while it looked really bad, I thought that they were very fixable things. When they were that bad, surely the only way is up. And one of the things that you're looking at is who's going to start in that full back line for them over the course of this summer. At the weekend, it was Cian Murphy, Davy Byrne and Michael Fitzsimons. Murphy only made his championship debut in 2020. You've obviously got Gannon coming off the bench in that position as well. It feels now as if Dessie Farrell has a back 3 there which are reliable, which aren't going to get opened up, and just are hitting a bit of better form. That if they played Armagh again in the morning or played Kerry again in the morning, I don't think their weaknesses will be as naked as they were in those first couple of weeks of the league. The half forward line is also very interesting. I think it's very strong. Scully, Howard, and then Bugler at 11, which I think is a very, very interesting line. I think that they could give a half back line a lot of problems. And then they had 8 players in the score sheet as well on Sunday. So that kind of says to me the system is working, because players popping up into their into the position they're supposed to be picking up, or in and around the D, and taking their score, and away you go. And I think that's a really positive sign for them as well. I do think, and we probably don't have time for this one, but I do think that I think the Tyrone story is as big as the Dublin story.
Okay, well, hold that there.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, caller, and we will come back to it a little bit later on. It's 2 minutes past 8, but if you've got a view on the power rankings this week, we'd like to hear from you. Some teams have moved up quite a lot. Some teams have not moved down enough. We will come back to that a little bit later on, but that is this week's power rankings.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Right, 2 minutes past 8. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We've got plenty more to come. We're going to be talking about the GAA, GPA, the historic rivalry, and a little bit of an update on what should happen now, because it seems like a solution is relatively straightforward. We'll get to that in just a moment with Donal O'Neill, and then also this hour we're going to hear from Samuel Luckhurst about the Manchester United game tonight and the mood music around Cristiano Ronaldo's hat-trick at the weekend, and potentially the razing of Old Trafford to the ground, literally and figuratively. That's next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball's the best, number 1.
It's the GOAT of sports apps.
Talk about the greatest of all time. Nathan, Big Joe. Big Joe's the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. We know it.
So
every single time. Yes.
It's tough going. It's tough for my ego. I'm going to say I'm the Djokovic of this scenario.
I love it.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Download the OTB Sports app now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
January, it became very clear that COVID has ended. We're back to full spectators at stadiums. And then I suppose the annual report is released, and 2021 was a very successful year, so it even begged, to question whether even in a COVID year, should the players have been taking a reduced mileage rate and a capped expenses. I don't think they should, but they did. And they took those measures, and it was just, players definitely 100% expected, once we're out of COVID, those cost saving measures will be removed, and we'll be looking to, add on to what players need. Look at inflation, do we need to start exploring 70 cent because inflation this year has went through the roof. But players are happy. Look, just get us back to 65 cent, and whatever I incur, whether it's 2 sessions or 6 sessions, that's the cost, and that varies throughout the year. That might be 5 sessions during the pre-season. It might be 3 sessions during, the week before championship. But that was the basis of it. And fundamentally, Joe, the charter is the main thing is the players get back is the few expenses they get for travelling to games, and the expenses really is a symbol of respect.
Yeah.
And players just feel that the GAA generates a significant amount of money, and in return, the collective agreement, Joe, is that all players are treated the same.
Yes.
All players, all divisions are treated the same.
Tom Parsons there, the Chief Executive of the GPA, on the show last night speaking with Joe Malloy. Donal O'Neill, one of the founding members of the GPA, is with us to give us his thoughts on the current impasse. Donal, on the face of it seems like we're not a million miles away from a solution here, and yet this is as militant as we've seen from the GPA in a long time. So what's your take or instinct on what's going on at the moment?
Well, it's back to the future, really. I couldn't quite believe what I was reading yesterday. I'd been travelling for a few days, so I wasn't entirely up to speed, but it literally felt like the type of incident we would have encountered and argued back in the day. So I was just stunned that it's an issue at all, to be quite honest. It's appalling.
What do you think is the issue? Because overnight we've had the letter that the GAA have written to the county executives to say, look, we have restored the 65 cent for 4 sessions, but it's bad practice for us to mandate any more than 4 sessions, because the ESRI report in 2019 said that it was 31 hours a week was what we were asking of players. That's too much, and that's all we're willing to pay for. I see a little bit of merit in that, but I don't really see how it's the players' responsibility to fix that. It's actually the county managers and the county board's problem to fix that. So it just seems like everybody kind of agrees a little bit, but they don't know what they agree on, and they can't find a solution.
Well, I mean, to put this in perspective, that issue has never been anything but one of the biggest issues facing players. I remember sitting down with my cousin James McCartan when we were at Queen's University and tracking the hours that he was doing between travel. He was playing from everybody from Ulster to international rules to 21s county club, and I can assure you it was a lot more than 31 hours even back then. That issue has never been addressed, and I don't think it can be addressed in the context of an amateur sport. And because there are no contractual agreements to which the players are bound and the county boards are equally bound, you don't have any framework outside of a fair play mechanism. And the GAA don't do fair play. They do money and they do what suits them, and that hasn't changed. And again, it's just back to the future stuff. It's absolutely remarkable that this is even being discussed in 2022. I'm just astonished.
The solution does seem to be to get the county boards to pay for any extra sessions over the 4. It doesn't seem like it's that difficult to work out. It's just that we were talking about this a little bit earlier on. County boards notoriously cheap. Who's going to make the case that actually the players have done 5 sessions or 6 sessions? Is the GPA representative automatically then accused of being treacherous, was the word that Eoin used earlier on? Like, how could you potentially police a limit in the number of sessions?
Well, you can't. It's never been possible. It's not possible within the current framework. And again, that's because of the amateur nature of the sport. Players will always want to perform at their zenith. So any athlete and anybody who's ever competed at any level in any sport will understand the desire that burns in any individual, male, female. If they're at an elite level or thereabouts, or trying to get to that level, they're going to do everything they can. And they're certainly not going to listen to old boys in suits telling them you should only be training 3 days a week. That's complete and utter nonsense in the context of elite sport. So we need to give the players the best opportunity to put on their best performance, and that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing the appetite of the players to be the best they can be, and we're seeing the old guys in suits doing what they always do, trying to dictate something that really makes no sense at all. And it's maybe it's a slight failure on the GPA's part that they haven't been taken seriously enough in negotiations to allow this to happen. I don't know. I'm not a party to that. But if I was in the GPA's seat, I would be acting very, very aggressively against this, because it needs to be put to bed and the GAA need to be put back in their box, in my opinion.
Do you think it's viable for county boards to pick up the tab on the remaining expenses, or does that just illustrate then the inequalities between different counties?
Well, I mean, I've always said that, many county boards are completely inept. They run on a very amateur basis. I've had dealings with some of them directly, and it's something that has never been addressed. We put proposals to the GAA 20 plus years ago, how they might go about that. They were ignored. They've done nothing in the interim. So it's no surprise that county boards find themselves, creaking at the seams. They always have, and they always will do in this type of framework that we see, which really never changes within the context of the GAA's macro structures. So that's not going to change. But this is not, the county boards are units of the GAA. So it's for the GAA and the county boards to sort this out. It's not for players to have to scramble for petrol money and expenses. It's absolutely ridiculous in this day and age. So the GAA need to get their house in order, and I think the GPA need to, really respond very aggressively to make sure they do that. And this is not an issue that ever comes back round the block again, because frankly it's ridiculous.
What would you do, Donal, if they were to seek your counsel today and there's some talk of disrupting throw-in times at the weekend? What would you do to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Well, the one strategy that we had in the back pocket, and we never triggered it, and obviously it's hypothetical to say whether it would have the players would have fully complied or not. But I would say certainly we're happy to play the matches, but turn the cameras off. You can have your radio coverage, but please turn the cameras off, or we will not be taking the field. You need to hit the GAA where it hurts, because nothing else works, and nothing has changed in 20 years clearly. So that would be my advice. To go in very, very hard, because here we are 20 years later with the same old issues, and the GAA had a very successful year last year, you might say, commercially. So I don't see how there is any rationale for penalising players, especially with the cost of living crisis that's now emerged. I find it unfathomable that the GAA could act in this manner at this point in time.
That's interesting. So it wasn't a strike as in we're not going to play the games. We're going to play the games. We're going to give everybody who attends the games the opportunity to see the game, and we're going to give everybody the opportunity to experience the game by listening to it. But the commercial contracts that you have around broadcast rights will be affected.
Correct. And each and every sponsorship that the GAA engages in is, directly connected and feeds off those television pictures. So that was a mechanism that we identified to be very, very powerful. You wouldn't ostracise the fans. People could still listen to the game. They could still attend the game, but turn the cameras off. And now, of course, we've got additional sponsors and shirts. I mean, were the players consulted on any of that? I mean, they're billboards to an extent that they haven't been at any time in the past. So the train just keeps moving down that, commercial track, and the players seem to have stalled somewhere down the line. So that's what I see. And as I said at the outset there, it's back to the future stuff, and it's not good enough.
There has been some form of protest in players not coming out to do post-match interviews on Saturday and Sunday at the weekend, but there are a couple of exceptions to it. Jack O'Connor, John Maughan and Pádraig Joyce, three of the managers who come to mind, who came out and did speak to the media. Does that damage the impact of the strike and the protest, in your opinion?
Well, if Pádraig Joyce had done it 20 years ago, yes, but not today. He's a manager. Managers do what managers do, and that's a separate issue. So I would say absolutely not. I mean, this is a player issue, and it's for players to address and stand up and be counted if that's what the GPA decides. And I hope they do. I really hope they do.
What was really interesting yesterday is that Pat Nolan from The Mirror tweeted a couple of pages from Desi Farrell's book, and just to try and give a bit of context into Pádraig Joyce's comments, because when he did speak, he said that he doesn't really care for the GPA. Those conversations are above his pay grade, is essentially what he said when he came out after the Galway game at the weekend. And the context of this is an incident which I had no idea of back in 2001 when the GPA held their awards and Pádraic Joyce was due to get the award, and then late votes came in and Declan Meehan became the Footballer of the Year. Michael Donnellan, I understand, picked up the award, and then the award was Michael Donnellan picked up the award on Meehan's behalf, and then because Meehan was in Boston and Joyce wasn't available in the first instance either, and the award was sent back. And I think were you the recipient of the award when it was sent back, or that's right, the literal recipient of it?
It's a great pub quiz question. So that particular year, I had the trophy for the GPA Player of the Year, indeed, in my apartment in Dublin. It was sent back to me by Declan, so I remember it well. But listen, I mean, the reality is Pádraic Joyce was a magnificent footballer, but he's not a footballer now. So this comes back to, in my earlier point, this is an issue for the players of today. And I think managers, officials can sometimes get carried away with their own profile. It's really got nothing to do with them. Desi's now obviously the Dublin manager, which casts an interesting shadow on it. But again, you know, even he's irrelevant. This is a player issue, and it's for players to resolve, because it will keep coming back if they don't put it to bed once and for all.
What happened when you received the award that time? Well, there's some suggestion in the book that it was dismantled or something.
Yes, it was. It came in. I can still see the box that came to my door, and I didn't know what it was. So this was obviously pre-Amazon days and all of that. So it was quite unusual to get a big cardboard box in the post. So yeah, it had been dismantled and boxed up neatly and sent back to me in Dublin. We often joked about it afterwards. If the car had been up for grabs that year, would it have come back? But there was only 500 quid on the table that particular year, so Opel weren't on the scene. But yeah, I mean, listen, it was a huge administrative embarrassment for us at that time. You have to put your hands up and say that was a big mistake. But you know, we were savagely under-resourced at that time, and we were literally just, you know, doing our best, and we were taking punches from all corners at that point. But definitely hands up, our mistake. Fully understandable how Joyce and Meehan reacted, and I'm sure many others would have done the same thing. But it's a long time ago now, and I think you know, I think Pádraic's comments on what's happening today are probably less relevant than they were back then, because he's a manager, he's not a player, and I think that's paramount here. The players need to step forward and stand up, in my opinion.
Was it not a state-of-the-art mobile phone instead of a car at the point? I think it was smart car phone warehouse were the commercial sponsors.
Yeah, there was 500 quid on a phone, so right. that was what was on the table at that point. But
did that get sent back as well?
I waited as an arm man until 2002 before we had the car, obviously. So that worked out okay for the lads up north.
Did Declan send the phone back as well?
I don't know if the phone had been delivered. Car from warehouse. I'm trying to remember the detail. Probably would have just sent that directly, but I didn't receive the phone. And I didn't check whether it was used or not, but the trophy came back neatly boxed up, and that was one of the, I suppose, the early incidents with the GPA when we didn't know whether we were going to get over the line or not. But things changed very rapidly after that in the following 12 months, and we identified the All-Stars as a target because we knew that we could inflict real commercial damage on the GAA by starting our own awards program, sticking with it and trying to make it something substantial, which it went on to become the following year.
And then ultimately they ended up merging as the merger, and the two organisations became very close in recent years. So this is a fracture in the relationship for the first time in a number of years, really. One last question from me: what do the GPA need to do, or does it matter about keeping the general population and the general membership on side, or is that also irrelevant?
Well, no, I think it's always relevant, because if you step forward to take action, you'd like to think that there would be compliance. And again, you know, I'm so far removed from it now, it's hard to know, but you were always aware back in the day that the amateur ethos of the sport filtered down to the players' response to some of the issues. And I'm not sure the psychology of that is interesting, because in a professional sport, when the unions move, everybody moves. We were never 100% sure that we had that level of support at any point. And you could probably question whether the GPA has that today. I don't know. But you wouldn't really find out until you stepped into the ring. But, my move would be to strike out very, very firmly against the GAA, because they've proven that the leopard doesn't change its spots. And the only thing that they understand, to put it bluntly, is a good kicking.
All right, we're going to put a request out to the GAA to come on and talk a little bit more about what their plan to try and resolve the impasse is. But for now, Donal O'Neill, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thanks, fellas.
It's Donal O'Neill giving us some thoughts and insight into the founding fires that the GPA came from.
Yeah, it's interesting, the idea that a television blackout on games was going to be their course of action in a head-to-head. That seems like maybe the third step here. If they do go and delay kickoffs, delay throw-ins this weekend, will that be weekend 3, the final weekend of the league? Could that be the situation they reach, I wonder?
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with this. I do have sympathy with the trying to get to a shared amount of expenses for each team, or a salary cap, a wage cap, ultimately that will dictate the number of sessions. And I appreciate Donal's point that players want to train as professionally as they can. But whether or not you need collective sessions 5 times a week or 6 times a week, you probably can't have that and be amateur.
No, and I think that was actually Colm O'Rourke's point on Sunday night, wasn't it? That this is a move to semi-professionalism. Now, I think that maybe the point came across as if he wasn't in support of what the GPA were after at all, but
it isn't. No, their move to semi-professionalism is gone.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm not sure what he was trying to say, but what I took it up as, maybe reading between the lines, is that he feels that if you're training 5 times a week, you're essentially a semi-pro. But I guess the definition of semi-professionalism is if you're getting paid a certain amount that allows you to half work and half not work, which this wouldn't be at all. It'd just be about limiting the amount of money that you're losing by playing Gaelic football or hurling.
Yeah. Look, this is obvious. It seems like it's about something else. That this is a proxy war for something else, and I don't know. Will it get worse? Is there a possibility that we won't be able to watch games?
Well, it just feels that that this could have been solved quite easily, and it hasn't been, which would give me a little bit of cause for concern. And maybe that they're just not on the same page, or maybe things just need to be explained a little bit clearer, and everything will get sorted out. But this shouldn't be in day 5. This is the 5th day of the story, isn't it? So we shouldn't have got this far.
What's the definition of a session? Asks Brian. Just say session 5 is actually 4B, a continuation of the 4th session, and expense it.
That's a guy who could. I want doing my accounts.
Maybe not your accounts, but certainly at the negotiation table for this. And so we'll have session 4B and we'll have session 4C, and away you go, lads. We'll just put that in a little separate column. 8:22 this morning here. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. Right, so Neil talking about our rugby coverage yesterday. It's terrible being an England fan at the moment. The result was never in doubt after the card. Had things played out differently, Ireland would still have walked away winners. The scrum penalties were perplexing, and it looked like those decisions affected Ireland, but they pulled through convincingly. And as plenty have pointed out, England never looked like scoring. Complete shambles from England, the Six Nations, performing worse than last year. Many believe England under Jones will come good at the World Cup. I think they're deluding themselves, and the RFU have put themselves in a corner by giving Jones a blank cheque through to the World Cup. Whatever credit Jones had, he's running up a pretty steep overdraft at the moment, and many of us believe he's sold us a lemon. To the rugby now. I'm delighted to say Mike Ross is with us this morning to try and make some sense of what happened in the scrums. Mike, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. On the face of it, there's been a big backlash from Ireland anyway about the nature of the scrum penalties, and Matthew Reynaud is being blamed for what happened. Do we need to look at ourselves first, though, and stop blaming the referee and maybe try and understand what we could have done differently in this scenario? Because let's say we were to be refereed like that in a World Cup quarter-final, or, we can dream a semi-final. Come on afterwards, blaming the referee is well and good, but you're out of the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the game on Saturday. I was kind of in the south stand, so it was kind of difficult for me to see what was going on. But afterwards, I went through them a few times and I had a look, and look, there's definitely stuff we could have done better. A couple of times they were losing engage and taking a step back and readjusting, which helped England do what they wanted. But at the same time, England were creating a kind of a shearing off scenario. So Genge is kind of chasing up on the loose head side, and then Sinclair is coming across to try and create a 3-on-2 and shear off to the side. And if a ref isn't refereeing that, it's quite hard to stop. I mean, there's a couple of things you can do about it, but they're it's not guaranteed. So yeah, look at a combination of, like, we can probably be better in our setup and engagement. But there's also an element of the referee needs to do his job.
Can you explain that England move? So essentially, Genge goes in first, and it takes out the hooker completely. Is it?
No. So Genge chases hard up, and he kind of actually not really directly against Furlong. He kind of goes almost on his outside, and then that creates a pivot in the scrum, and then Sinclair attacks the joint as a result. Right. So if the scrum goes like this, they try and break off. So kind of pivoting around Furlong and hopefully squaring up then, and then they march up the field. I mean, if you think back to last year, Ireland did something similar, where England attacked and then Ireland kept their shape and drove straight through.
Is there anything that you can do if you're Tadhg Furlong in that position?
Couple of things, but they're not guaranteed success. One, you can start crabbing to the right to counteract the rotation that's coming against you. So the whole thing starts going right across the pitch to the right. Another thing is to maybe start angling in yourself, and then stay square. Don't allow yourself to be taken by the rotation, but you have to really angle across, and then they will break off then. But then you've stayed where you are, and it looks basically two packs marching up against the field in opposite directions. But those are both hard to do
and risky enough, I suspect, in that the referee looks for who's going forward, and it kind of referees on momentum as opposed to the technicalities of it.
Yeah, well, it's just generally what French referees do. They will, if someone looks like they're going forward, they're going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, let's say we had a magic rewind button, and we knew what England were going to do, and we're sitting in the coach's room in advance of the game. What are you saying to the Ireland team about, is it more early engagement with the referee? Because Furlong did try a little bit of it across the course of the match, and it didn't seem to have that much of an impact on Reynaud. How do you influence the referee to get a better outcome, and how do you actually influence then what England are doing?
Usually you supply footage to the referee prior to the game of things you're concerned about. That doesn't exist in this scenario. Or you can verbally tell them, hey, look, we want a fair contest. We want the scrummage square and straight, and we don't have to be dancing around. But yeah, it is difficult. Ultimately, the referee is going to decide how he's going to interpret things, and there's only so much you can do about that. But potentially, I'd like to see us cheat a little bit more. Sometimes you have to, make your own decisions. And not be so. If you look at Ireland historically, we've kind of had a very square and straight scrum, and haven't exactly. I don't think I've ever seen Irish back do what England did at the weekend. So I don't see why we shouldn't start doing it. If it's going to be rewarded, why shouldn't we do it?
And that's interesting, especially in the context of the two props being pretty experienced for Ireland at the moment. So it's not something that they've ever engaged in really, if they didn't resort to it on Saturday.
Yeah, well, it's not really how this Irish scrum is coached. John Frogert has been doing a pretty good job up until now. And if you look at how Ireland scrum is square, it's straight. They try and dip and push at the same time in the same direction. I've scrummaged in England for a number of years early in my career, and the scrum is seen as it's free for all. The one rule of the scrum: just go forward, don't matter how.
Right, so that kind of is a nice petri dish of, I guess, bending the rules to whatever meets your strengths.
Yeah, well, if you're getting away with it, you're getting penalties. If I was in England's position, I'd have done exactly the same thing. I'd have kept going to where I was getting penalties, because I was giving them entries into the game, it was giving them points, it was giving them strength and momentum. So, and if the referee's not refereeing it, then by all means keep doing it.
Do you think there's a possibility that we didn't get a yellow card because Reynaud didn't quite know what he was given the penalties for? That like Eddie Jones afterwards is complaining, that's not exactly a surprise, but that the referee's like, I'm going to just give this penalty here, but I don't really know. I mean, I've had a word with them. I'm not really convinced myself.
Yeah, well, there was no one specific offender, was there? You know, I mean, you can penalise for, well, in Reynald's man, going backwards. So, I mean, there's no one falling to the floor. There's no one, you know, standing up. It was just kind of slewing around and a bit of a merry-go-round, really. And Reynald just decided that it was one or the other's fault.
One of the other things that became a big talking point in advance of the last World Cup when Devon Toner was dropped was the tight head lock. Is that something that we should all be having a conversation again about this week? Is there anything in our back row, or sorry, in our second row that could have helped prevent, like was Tadhg Furlong a bit of an island?
Well, look, your tight head lock is very important to your scrum. Okay, and look, we lost James Ryan early on, which didn't help. Hendy does play there quite a bit, and he's pretty good. But you know, James is, you know, a fairly key component of that scrum. And if you look at the loose head lock, like Tadhg Byrne, he's more of a jumping lock or a 6. You know, so he's not like, we don't have a Paul Williams in the pack, you know, who's a bit of a tractor when it comes to the scrum. We don't have, like, I think the last kind of scrummaging, second row scrummaging lock like that would be Quinn Roux, who's you know, is over in France at the moment. So, you know, we play a quick mobile game, and our pack makeup reflects that.
Is there anything you can do? Is there anybody, like, should we be trying to turn Ryan Baird for the benefit of his long-term future into that, or not?
I don't know. I don't know how we scrummages. So, but look, there's a smart brains trust in the Irish coaching unit, so I'm sure they'll be looking at all the different options. Like, I think that the one big, if you look through the provinces, you probably have someone like Klein who would fit the bill. But does he be able to deliver the rest of the bits and pieces that this Irish team wants? I don't know.
So how does this coaching team go about, I guess, fulfilling your wish there of wanting to see Ireland cheat a little bit more?
Just, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do it. Like, there's no point just throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, right? So we've had, up until now, we've had, like, even on Saturday, our scrum success is 100%. You know. And it's the first time I've seen us troubled in a long time. So I'm not going to hit the panic button and just going to reset everything that we're doing. But, you know, perhaps, you know, start gaming into a few more scenarios. You know, I mean, every week of training, there's 2 up packs going at each other, so we can start almost like war gaming, you know, different scenarios that you see coming up against. And I'm sure that this week they'll be looking at that because, you know, Scotland will have been watching that and go, right, we're going to try this, see if it works. But it might never work again, you know. I mean, referee might never get a referee who will permit it.
Yeah, and like, I guess when you talk about wargaming, I mean, once the Six Nations is done, they're going to zoom out. They're going to look at the summer. They're going to look at South Africa coming along this autumn. They're probably going to look back at a couple of the instances during this year's Six Nations, and France and England in particular. So you've got South Africa, you've got France, you've got New Zealand as potential teams who are going to either be the avenue to dreams coming true for Irish rugby players at the World Cup, or the ones that are going to kill the dreams at the end of next year. So is there any commonality when you look at those 3 opponents in particular that Ireland can be targeting and saying, listen, we need to get better at X or Y?
With the Southern Hemisphere teams, is it?
The teams we play this year, I guess, later on.
Well, if you look, South Africa probably have the biggest threat in the scrum. If you look at what they did to England in the final couple of years ago, you know, they have, and you know, even the Lions during the year, they have some excellent props. So they're probably going to be the main threat scrummage wise. New Zealand, they're actually a bit, you know, they scrum pretty much like Ireland. They don't really look for New Zealand trying to play after scrum a bit more, right? Ireland will try and attack with their scrum a bit more, but New Zealand do tend to play off it. And Australia, I haven't watched them for a while actually, so I'm not quite sure how good their scrum is, but they're always up or down, you know. I often see the Australian scrum getting written off, and then it delivers a great performance, and then the following week gets rinsed. So it's but of all those 3, South Africa are definitely the ones I worry about the most.
Just in terms of strength and depth, like the general consensus afterwards was that, whoa, that front row is going to, like, Cian Healy might not be at this level anymore. But that doesn't seem to be what you're saying at all. If the referee had refereed that properly, at the weekend, then we wouldn't actually be worried about the strength and depth in the scrum. So do we need to maybe take that one-off as a one-off and make sure that we're prepared for the next time that happens to cheat back or to influence the referee in a way? What's the truth about our strength and depth?
Look, I think it can. Our strength and depth can be better. We developed Porter into pretty much going up there to be into the world class category at tight head, and then we moved him back because we wanted, himself and Tyke on the pitch at the same time. So, we need to figure out succession planning there. So we've got Finlay Bealham there. Tom O'Toole's I think he's injured at the moment, is he? And then so we've, as Lou said, with Porter and Keane, who's, I think he's got a few more years left in him. As you said, I don't think, one tough decision game suddenly means he's finished. It's I still back him. I thought aside from the scrum penalty decisions, I thought he had a decent game around the pitch. I remember him chasing down the scrum half at the back of them all during the game. He's still quite mobile, and he's as strong as ever. Below that, it's become there's a few cabs queuing up. Dave Kilcoyne obviously is on the bench the weekend. You got Ed Byrne. Lou said there needs to be kind of clear, second or third choice emerging. And there's a few guys putting their hands up at the moment. None of them have really got there yet. At tight head, below Tom O'Toole, you still have Mark Moore knocking around the Ulster. Keenan Knox down in Munster. So there needs to be an emergence of this guy's going to be third choice first.
Yeah, it's difficult to do because you can't really just pick somebody and work on them, or can you? Is that the right way to do that? It's like, okay, you're our number 3 guy, and so you're going to get more time. We're going to influence your local coaching ticket, and we're going to bring you into the Ireland squad, and that's it. Yeah,
look, you've seen that they bring guys into the training squad so they get an exposure and they get a taste for what it's for. But what all those guys really need is just consistent game time for their provinces. So to really kind of drive the competition. So at the Interpros they get a chance to put their hands up and see who's going to get picked. But look, a lot of those guys are young, so we have a nice young crop coming up. But they need to really put their hands up and start putting pressure on the guys above them.
All right, Mike, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
It's Mike Ross giving us some insight into what we need to do to fight back the next time it happens to us.
Yeah, or come with a dark game plan. The only way Ireland are going to go far in this World Cup is by being hated.
In our pre-show meeting, Joseph was talking about Andy Lee one time, saying that if you get a low blow or a headbutt early in a fight, the only thing you can do is punch back in the balls or headbutt back, because that way the message is sent: we ain't taking this.
Yeah,
that's over. So cheat back.
It does seem, obviously, when somebody gets, especially when he's talking about that first technique that the English scrum were using at the weekend, that's a very, very hard thing to combat. I suppose the next scrum is your opportunity as opposed to within that one scrum.
Yeah, or to excuse me, sir, I hope you realise what they're doing here. I know you're such a beautiful, educated, you've got such a giant rugby brain, sir, that you can see that this front row is cheating, sir. Yes? En français? Tu peux le faire en français?
Maybe that's it.
Je peux pas.
Maybe that's it. Maybe.
No.
Maybe they need to learn French between now and then. But that's, I guess, if you're coming up against a French team,
Sexton should have enough from his year in Paris. No,
he should do
2 years.
But I'm just thinking, I guess if you come up against France next year with French referees, obviously something's wrong, and that would be a grave injustice.
Look, stranger things have happened. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Time for the papers.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He says bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be, no, I'm not, yes. No.
Right, we're going to start with otbsports.com. No, we don't have. Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah. So the football pod is out for you this morning. Money problems. Jacks are back. And Kerry Mayo. Tommy's stealing my Jacks are back line. Wrestling legend Scott Hall, aka Razor Raymond, dies aged 63. Did I get the Razor Ramon? I don't know. Yeah. There's no God-given right at the top. Pat Nevin on Chelsea's future. Roman Abramovich is actually on the front of the UK paper. There's a picture of him.
Read on the flight.
Yeah, in the VIP lounge in an airport in Israel on his way to Istanbul. There's a couple of pictures of him. I wonder who was taking the photographs and what level of security there was around it. I'm sure he's not very happy about the fact. But he is on the front of every of the English papers this morning as the club is up for sale. US-British bid leads race. That's on the back of the London Times. Reunited Reds plan to bring the dream team of Kane and Pochettino to Old Trafford in the summer. City aren't much cop. That's after the 0-0 draw yesterday, and Cheltenham is here, so lots to talk about that. The sweetest thing, Ruby Walsh, Honeysuckle will want to do what she always does, so you've got to tune in to watch Honeysuckle today, because if she gets beaten you're going to miss it, and if she wins you're going to miss it. That is all basically in the Examiner. Front and back is Cheltenham. United could demolish Old Trafford in rebuild plan. This is a story from the Telegraph. It's carried on the back of the Independent this morning. And GAA cannot continue to fund bad practice with regard to player welfare, says Tom Ryan. There's really interesting details actually from Kieran Shannon in his piece, which I think explains why there's so much pissed offness. It's not the 4 training sessions was like the line in the sand for the GAA. They wanted 3 training sessions. That's what they wanted to pay for. What alarmed the GPA, this is Kieran Shannon's piece, what alarmed the GPA is that for a few months the GAA wanted to continue with just 50 cent a mile, flat rate, and the number of collective sessions a week would be capped at 3, and the number of players per panel would be limited to 32. So that's not quite the same as, we accept your 4 sessions a week is what the ESRI want. It's like, the ESRI report is a handy piece of evidence for us to stop the runaway train of expenses on teams. And the difficulty is that obviously they've spoken before about the runaway train of expenses. So there has to be a solution where the rich counties subsidise the poor counties and an agreed amount is given to everybody and you manage that. And any shortfall is not picked up by the players but is picked up by the county board. And that's written into the charter. But
there might need to be a bit of give on the GPA side about the welfare aspect of things, about some sort of commitment to honouring the less than 4 sessions a week idea.
As in they'll self-report.
Yeah, that might be the way the negotiations get.
Maybe, but it's hard. Isn't it hard to ask players to self-report when the manager's going to drop you if you report?
And as Donal O'Neill said earlier on, everybody wants to get to the zenith.
Last month, the GAA reported a surplus of 13.5 million for the 2021 financial year on the back of government support. What's the difference between the government support, and the furlough that Liverpool were getting grief overtaken? You made a lot of money, you took a lot of money from the government, you've added it to your coffers. What's the difference?
There is no real difference. Obviously, the perception is that it's different because one is a professional organisation, one isn't supposed to be a professional organisation, but the GAA is very much a professional organisation outside of the players that play the game.
Saudi, you like that, is the back page of the Sun, and it's Chelsea have received a bid from a Saudi Arabian group for 2.7 billion, and Emerick Laporte's missed last night. Race against time, potential Chelsea owners rush to meet deadline for offers. United look at Old Trafford demolition. Different picture of Roman Abramovich on the front of the paper in the Telegraph. And so anyway, look, Carl Malani is with us at 8:43 this morning. Carl, with the Sporties, good morning to you.
Morning, lads, how are you?
The players finished up being a mammoth tournament. Maybe a 6-day golf tournament is the way forward.
Yeah, a lot of people said yesterday, why don't they finish every tournament on a Monday when we can all watch it, and it's kind of the only thing that's on. In fairness to the organisers, fair play to them for getting it finished before Tuesday, because it would have run into this week's tournament then and caused trouble. I think the Valspar Championship is starting on Thursday. It's in the General Florida area as well. It was a bit of a disaster and probably took from the tournament in terms of the flow of it and the traditional Sunday finish and all of that. But Cameron Smith ended up winning it by a shot on 13 under. Shane Lowry's final round challenge didn't really materialise at all. A couple of bogeys on the front 9. He got it together around the turn and ended up in a tie for 13th on 6 under, so a pretty decent week all round. Rory McIlroy, despite his struggles in the first 3 rounds, had a really good closing round of 66 to end on 3 under alongside Seamus Power as well. So an important week for Seamus Power. He's back inside the top 50 now. which he's going to be keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks. If he can be there at the end of the month, he'll get into the Masters in a month's time. So key couple of weeks coming up for him. But yeah, good tournament. 3.6 million, I think, for the winner, which
it's not bad.
Isn't bad.
Okay, he's got $1 million for finishing second.
Yeah, and I think you could finish as low as somewhere inside the top 40, 36th or something like that. You still get 100 grand or something like that. So,
cover your expenses anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, given everything that's in the news.
Train 5 times a week that week.
Yeah. But yeah, it was the weather didn't help things at all.
I mean, you say that, but it did actually make it a much better TV spectacle, right? Apart from the fact that the best golfers in the world weren't winning, so it was too much of a
I guess from a scheduling point of view, in terms of TV coverage, it wasn't ideal. But yeah, it was a little bit softer. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, Bay Hill, when the conditions were so tough, it was kind of bogey golf and par golf that was getting guys up the field, whereas now at Sawgrass it was birdies, and probably Shane Lowry wouldn't have had his hole-in-one if the conditions were that little bit firmer and he wasn't able to get the backspin on the ball to get the hole-in-one on the 17th. But that was a cracking moment, great moment for him. I think just the 10th ever on that particular hole, and it's like one of the most iconic holes in the world as well.
What does Seamus Power need to do?
Be in the top 50 by the end of the month.
And how? So what does that mean in practice?
Well, basically he needs to have a couple of decent finishes. I think he's going to take a little bit of a break because he has an elbow injury that he needs to rest. Now he says, I think, that he's not overly concerned about it and not thinking about it too much, but I think, as any sports person, when a big event is coming up that's so iconic as the Masters is, I think it will be playing on his mind that he makes sure he gets into that tournament. And probably, I know you don't deserve anything in sport, but if Seamus Power doesn't deserve it, I'm not sure who does, because he's had such a good run of form to get himself up in that upper echelon in the tour. He's done it the hard way, so let's hope he can stay inside that top 50. But he needs just to keep playing a little bit, stay consistent. His form has deserted him in recent weeks a little bit, but if he can keep consistent now over the next couple of weeks, let's hope that it happens. So that's to look forward to, and the Masters just a month away, so let's hope it's a decent tournament. And Rory probably showed a little bit of form again on Sunday to give us a little bit of hope.
I mean, it's great that it'd be great if you could just stick the 4 days together.
Yeah,
that's all we want.
Yeah. So let's see. But elsewhere in sporting news, Pep Guardiola felt his Manchester City players couldn't have given any more as they were held to a goalless draw by Crystal Palace last night. The result means they're now 4 points clear of Liverpool at the top of the Premier League, though Liverpool do have a game in hand. Here at home last night, Shamrock Rovers held to a goalless draw by Dundalk. That was in the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. That leaves the champions in fourth, 2 points adrift of the leaders St Pat's. They beat UCD last night by 2-0. Aidan Keena scored a hat-trick for Sligo Rovers to help them move up to second. They were 3-1 winners at home to Finn Harps. Bohemians and Shelburne finished 1-1 at Dalymount Park, and then Derry City beat Drogheda United by 2-0. In the First Division, Cork City beat Waterford last night by 2-0. Galway were 2-1 winners against Treaty United. Bray collected their first points with a 2-1 win at Longford, and Cove were 3-2 winners away to Athlone. In the Scottish Cup last night, Celtic booked their place in the last four, 3-0 winners away to Dundee United, and they will play Rangers in the semi-finals. Manchester United's Champions League last 16 tie with Atletico Madrid is level at a goal apiece. That's ahead of tonight's second leg at Old Trafford. Kick-off for that one is at 8. Ajax and Benfica also in action this evening. They're at 2-2 after their first leg 3 weeks ago. The racing, of course, the Cheltenham Festival begins later today. Crowds set to return to Cheltenham. The feature on day one is the Champion Hurdle. That goes to post at 3:30. Honeysuckle and Rachel Blackmore favourites to land the honours for the second year in succession. The first of 7 races today is off at 1:30. There are 4 Grade 1s on the card, starting with the Supreme Novices Hurdle. We mentioned the golf already as well. Just to finish, Cameron Smith carded a final round of 6 under par 66 to capture the Players' Championship last night. He ended on 13 overall. That was 1 shot clear of Anirban Lahiri in second. Shane Lowry ended on 6 under. Rory McIlroy and Seamus Power were 3 shots further back.
3.6 million, of course, for him.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Carl, thanks very much for that. That's Carl Maloney with you there. You can catch his morning brief on the OTB Podcast Network. Just subscribe to our highlights feed. And, of course, you can read some more from him across the day on otbsports.com. A reminder, the show is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. So we should go back to the power rankings very briefly. And Patrick says, sorry, I missed that one. By Jesus, if you had Westmeath ahead of Offaly, I was switching off, says John. A lot of pressure there, Eoin. And Aina, a good Galway name, says, how are Galway 9th? 5 games, 5 wins and 9th. If Galway play Mayo in the morning, there's 1 or 2 points in it, but they are second. We beat Kildare for sure, he says.
But I'd say that's obviously the key point. Like, if any of that top 8 play Mayo in the morning, I would suggest that there will be 1 or 2 points in it. The only team that Mayo have beaten comfortably this year are Dublin, and I think we've got to the stage already where we can write off that early season Dublin form as a little bit excessive in its grimness. So I think that they're not 5 points worse than Mayo at this point. It is 1 or 2 points. So give me another team who wouldn't get within a couple of points of Mayo is my point. And I just don't think that Kildare have done enough wrong for them to be dropped below Galway. I did consider it for sure, but I guess Kildare, a couple of weeks after beating Dublin, to have them down outside the top 8 would have been particularly harsh. Maybe next week though. It'll be ancient history come next week.
We'll see.
If Kildare can take a battering, that'll help me out.
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to take a battering from anybody.
No, they're not. The one thing I would say about Kildare is that are a few of the problems from the 2009-2010 era starting to creep up a little bit in terms of wides, shot selection. I think they did 10 wides at the weekend. I think they had 3 very good goal chances. Now, in fairness, I think Derek Irwin was back at the weekend to come off the bench, came on for Paddy Woodgate. So all of a sudden himself, Jimmy Goals, can we call him Jimmy Goals? Is that a thing? No, Jimmy Highland. That did not get a good response from Gerard there. And Daniel Flynn, that's a pretty good full forward line. So that's one way of remedying your lack of good shot selection, is to have a very, very good full forward line. It doesn't mean everything. Mayo, for example, on Saturday night, I think struggled to get the ball into the right people's hands late in the game. It was Lee Keegan, obviously, who took that shot late in the game.
I didn't ask you about the matchups.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So, just on Mayo, I do think, and this is a wider point rather than just on the point of Saturday, is Oisin Mullen marking David Clifford a complete waste?
Did he mark him for the whole game?
Not the whole game, but the majority of it.
And who switched in?
O'Hora.
Right. Wouldn't that be much better?
I think so. I think O'Hora would actually relish the chance of going 80 minutes with Clifford for the full thing.
But then you get Oisin Mullen as a creator as well.
Yeah, I actually think it'd be interesting if O'Shea was available to have put Mullen on O'Shea, see if he can push him back the other way.
Yeah.
The only thing is Mayo are flush with halfbacks, as we know. Obviously it was Keegan who came up with that late effort, and then you had Paddy Durkin in the team as well.
Or put Keegan on Clifford.
Yeah, now obviously there are the ghosts of 2019 that haunt Mayo people, and the idea of Lee Keegan as a full back, I suspect, given he got roasted by Conor Callaghan that day. But I would say that maybe Padraig O'Hora is your central defender, and maybe Keegan has that buffer of your full back to his right or to his left. I just think with Oisin Mullen and his particular set of talents, I think having him mark David Clifford was a bit of a waste. Clifford played well, and maybe Mullen stopped him from exploding on the night. But I think that you've got to accept that this guy's going to score a few points. You've got to think, what can we do to hurt you?
Yeah, anything less than 6 is break even.
Yeah.
Anything between 6 and 10, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Anything over 10, you got roasted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably fair enough.
Right. We'll come back to the Tyrone issue a little bit later on. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is time for us to turn our attention to tonight's Champions League action and just the general state of Manchester United at the moment. And I'm delighted to say Samuel Luckhurst is back with us. Samuel, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning. Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on again.
A nice quiet time in the Manchester United beat where Ronaldo's hip flexor is the biggest story in world football, and he comes back and scores a hat-trick, and then today it turns out that they're thinking about knocking down the stadium, and then there's the small matter of the Champions League game against Atletico Madrid. Do you ever sleep, I wonder?
Well, it's been nice in a way that Chelsea have dominated the news cycle, but obviously for ourselves, it's never quiet. It's pretty much like New York, really. It's like the club that never sleeps. There's always something going on with Ronaldo. I think it was maybe overstated. I think people just saw the name and saw the issue and saw the result against City and wanted to run with that. It was interesting that there was no context provided that he missed 2 games in January against Aston Villa with a hip flexor. He's since turned 37. If you've got a problem with your hip at that age, it's bound to take its toll. But the way he came back at the weekend was pretty spectacular. But I was quite taken aback by the sheer lack of gratitude that Rangnick showed for Ronaldo, which kind of confirms or certainly tallies with what a lot of us have been told and have written about Rangnick having reservations about Ronaldo's role going into next season. And then, of course, the stadium story that was done by a couple of colleagues. United downplayed that rather consciously. There seems to be a new attempt by United to try and downplay anything that gets written about them at the moment, which I don't think is necessarily the right right tactic or the way to go with it. But Old Trafford, if anyone's been there in the last 10 years, it's a decrepit stadium. It's been neglected. It's not been expanded once since the Glazer family took ownership of it. The quadrants were installed in 2006, a year after the Glazers completed their takeover. But that planning permission was given, I think, in 2004. So that was about a year before the Glazers took over the club. And Joel Glazer, whose name appears in the programme every week or every other week as co-chairman, has not been at Old Trafford for almost 3 years. And of course, we had Tom Brady in the director's box at the weekend, and he's still with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think he's attended as many games at Old Trafford in the last 2.5 years as the 6 Glazer siblings have combined.
I was going to ask, because so the NFL media that I cover, that I follow, covered that appearance of Brady as like some kind of personal plea from him to the Glazers. I kind of just assumed that meant somebody was there, somebody was actually meeting him, and that was kind of because he announced that he was coming back after, like, late night our time, but after the game.
Yeah.
I had assumed that he'd met somebody at the ground to kind of finally confirm something, it was just a jolly. There was nobody there. There were no officials from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Glazers at the club, it seems now.
As far as I could tell, there weren't. He tweeted his thanks to the Glazer family, I think a few hours before he announced that he hadn't retired. But it's not a surprise not to see a Glazer at Old Trafford. I think the only time any of them have been there this season was Avram Glazer for Ronaldo's second debut, unsurprisingly. As I said, I don't think Joel Glazer has been at Old Trafford or been to a United game full stop since the Champions League quarter-final at home to Barcelona in 2019. That was in April, so that is almost 3 years ago. The other siblings, you just don't... Some of them have literally never, ever been to Manchester. I think in the early days, Brian Glazer went to a few games, but I mean, it must have been maybe 10 years since he was last at a United game. It's mainly Avram Glazer and Joel Glazer who are the face of the family's ownership, if you like. Yet they very, very rarely fly over to Manchester. And with the glitterati that are in the director's box, United have not been quite as enthusiastic about that in recent months, since the UFC wrestler rather crassly decided to video Sir Alex Ferguson saying what a bad decision it was to drop Cristiano Ronaldo against Everton back in October. So even when they, glad hand these famous faces, or in some case unfamous faces, it can go wrong for United.
Okay, that is interesting. I didn't realise that. The story about knocking down Old Trafford, right? I mean, obviously we see how most of these big tickets items work. A kite gets flown in public, a story gets published, and then you see what the public response is going to be. Will Manchester United fans have a massive backlash against the notion that we could have a new stadium here? We could actually, one of the plans is to have 2 stadiums, a big one for the men's team and a smaller one for Youth Cup games and for the women's team. It sounds like a really excellent plan and a good use of their resources, and it's forward thinking. Is there so much emotional attachment to the specifics of the stadium as it stands now that idea might not fly with the fans?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, because I think the fans have just got fed up and tired with the state of the stadium. The stadium is an embarrassment. When certain players, esteemed players, go there for the first time, they might tweet about how wonderful it is to be there. I remember Dybala did that a few seasons ago because he'd never played there, and he scored for Juventus. And there is still prestige of playing at Old Trafford. People still use the nickname the Theatre of Dreams. It's not to my taste, but it's certainly, it kind of chimes with the romance of football. But you're lucky if you go there these days and you see that the paintwork has been updated. The roof in the South Stand, where we sit in the press box, has been notorious for leaking. I mean, it's some of this is really easy at times. You talk about the leaks from the dressing room, the leaks from the roof, and it all comes together. The most infamous one being, I think, a couple of years ago, just before the derby, but that wasn't in the South Stand, that was in the Stretford End. It was like it was just like a waterfall that was gushing down from the roof, and I think it was referred to on the fans forum. But even on that, they actually referred to the wrong roof. They were going on about the south stand because they just assume it's always the south stand that leaks, but it wasn't. It was the Stretford end's roof. So as emotionally attached and as wonderful as it is still walking through Old Trafford, which is one of those few stadiums, I suppose, where you still feel the history of it. You see the Munich clock outside. You go through the Munich tunnel, which is a very dignified tribute to the Munich air disaster in 1958. And you see the Sir Matt Busby statue, the Trinity statue. Ferguson's got a statue as well. It is, you can't help but be impressed by aspects of that. But you go inside it, and compared to Tottenham Stadium, it's shameful, really. And it's not just Tottenham Stadium. We haven't been to Atletico Madrid Stadium again a few weeks ago. That's far superior than United's. They've been left behind. Liverpool have an impressive new stand. Arsenal Stadium, it's starting to look a little bit dated, but it's still a lot more recent than Old Trafford. Manchester City, I suppose, is the most galling example. What they've done there in that region, and it's an Edison goal kick away from the Etihad. You've got the CFA where the academy and the women's team play, whereas United's women's team and academy, also their junior teams, still have to play at Leigh Sports Village, where access to it is, you have to get there by car, really. The tram doesn't go that far. There's not a nearby railway station. So it's pretty embarrassing that they still have to pretty much go to a rugby town to play junior football or women's football.
So all of this is actually fixable and might be the type of thing that would get fans on side if they were to maintain the bits that you've spoken about, which I presume they will, and then say this is going to be the shiny new edifice of the stadium. Is there any sense yet, there's stories in the back of the paper today linking Pochettino and Harry Kane, is there any sense that we're rounding out the short list of candidates, that everybody who wants to put their hat in the ring for the job has put their hat in the ring for the job, or are they going to wait until the summer and see who's actually available?
At this stage, I'd still be amazed if it is anyone other than Pochettino or Ten Hag. Pochettino seems eminently attainable, especially given the result that PSG had last week. He wants to be in England. He wants to manage United. That's been the case for a long, long time now. PSG, you hear the sounds coming out from there. It doesn't seem like it's going to extend into next season. It seems like everybody would be very surprised if Pochettino is still at PSG. Apparently, he still lives in a hotel in Paris as well, which, from experience covering United with Jose Mourinho, that is just, it's short-termism just looking at it from the outside, but from the inside, it's not particularly appreciated. I think with Pochettino, the problem he had was that he waited such a long time. And United did approach him informally at one point. During those 13 months he was out of work. They didn't go far enough. By the time that PSG had sacked Thomas Tuchel, I think he'd been out of work for 13 months. He was impatient. He was ready to get back into it. When he left Tottenham, there were one of three clubs he was going to go to. The other two possibilities would have been Real Madrid and United. It was either going to be those two or PSG. He ended up at PSG. It's not really working out. I think the fact that he's ended his trophy drought is rather insignificant. Even if they win Liga this season, I don't think anybody's going to bat an eyelid about that. But ultimately, United need someone who's going to be credible enough to compete with Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola. And with Pochettino, it is just about believable, even though his aura as a coach has maybe been diminishing in the last 3 or 4 years. I certainly think that Tottenham team that he had probably peaked in 2017. So you're looking at best part of 3 years before he actually was sacked by Daniel Levy. But he's just more suitable for United in that he's got Premier League experience. He wants that job. I think with Ten Hag, there's a hell of a lot more risk. People in Holland have always expected that he would move to Germany first and coach a club there before possibly moving on to England. The prospects of him going to United, where there is a rebuild job required in the summer, where you might not have Champions League football next season, having done what he's done at Ajax, I just think is too steep. He has assembled two very good Ajax teams, but you look at those Ajax teams, both of them, the pivotal players in them, or some of the pivotal players, are Premier League rejects. Dusan Tadic has done it for both teams. You've got Sebastian Haller, who is doing very well for Ajax at the moment. Daley Blind was probably a better United player than a lot of people gave him credit for. But the standard in the Eredivisie is so much lower. And also in the Eredivisie, Ajax are only 2 points clear of PSV Eindhoven. It's not an absolute certainty they'll win that league. It's not an absolute certainty they'll get in the quarterfinals of the Champions League either, given the scoreline with Benfica. So I think there are a lot more caveats with Ten Hag. And also, if you are Ten Hag, it might be more logical to keep your powder dry for another year and then take over at Manchester City, where the structure of the squad is so much more stable and there's so much more ready-made for him to go in there and be successful, especially where you look at City, they've got that Barcelona strand in the background with Chiqui Begiristain and Ferran Soriano, obviously Guardiola as well. And one of the biggest influences on Barcelona in the last 50 or 60 years was Johan Cruyff, who was, of course, schooled by Ajax. So I still think that Ten Hag would be a hell of a lot more suitable for City if or when Pep Guardiola does decide to leave when his contract expires in 2023.
You mentioned there that the new Manchester United manager is going to have a central part in this rebuild from this summer onwards, and as you say, it may not involve Champions League football. Where are Manchester United at the moment in terms of planning for that rebuild? Because like you see stories coming out last week about Arsenal and them even trying to plan a squad overhaul again this summer, even if they get Champions League football. With all the leaks from Manchester United, there's no sense that plans are afoot to get that rebuild going, because you'd suspect that transfer plans would want to be at least sketched out at this point in the season.
They would prefer to have the manager in place before the end of the season, whether it's an official announcement, an informal agreement, a gentleman's agreement. They would just rather know certainty who their manager is going to be for next season. But they are compromised by the fact that Champions League qualification is far from a certainty. If they do get it, I suspect it will be in the last weeks of the season. You don't see United coming anywhere near to boxing off Champions League qualification with games to spare. You go back to Mourinho's first season there. They finished sixth. They only got into the Champions League by winning the Europa League, which was in the final game of the season. He actually compiled two separate lists depending on whether they were in the Europa League the next season or the Champions League, because of course it does compromise who you can target. I think in Solskjaer's first summer in 2019, United's pool in the transfer market had not been that low for decades. It was an overestimation to say they had to sign Daniel James from Swansea, Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Crystal Palace. Harry Maguire came in from Leicester, who were probably a bottom half table side at that point, maybe a little bit high up, but they'd not long got rid of Claude Puel, and Brendan Rodgers had only got his feet under the table there. So that restricted United who they could target in terms of a marquee defender. And they needed a big money central defensive signing that summer. They were never going to get Matthijs de Ligt because, one, he's represented by Mino Raiola, and secondly, they didn't have Champions League football to offer him. Other options like Kalidou Koulibaly, that was a non-starter just because of how much Napoli were wanting for him. So they were pretty much railroaded into signing Harry Maguire for a world record fee. Just because he played for Leicester, and Leicester weren't as fashionable then as they have been in recent years, I suppose. So it's not a great position to be in. I think the next Premier League season begins in 140 odd days or something like that, which really doesn't seem very far away at all. And United have got to cram an awful lot into that, and they're going to have a pretty exhausting pre-season tour as well, by the sound of things, going off to Thailand and Australia. I think that's due to be confirmed soon. So really, they do need to get the manager situation sorted as soon as possible. And I suppose if Ajax do go out of the Champions League tonight, then where it comes down to Pochettino and Ten Hag, you've got two prime candidates there who aren't tied by Champions League football or focusing on the Champions League for the rest of the season, never mind the prospect of possibly meeting United in the knockout stage.
You have to think that if Manchester United is being run properly, they're doing some due diligence on the possibility that Thomas Tuchel might be available in the summer. Is there anything going on that front? And would that be an even better solution than either Poch or Ten Hag?
They wouldn't rule it out. They'd be daft to rule it out. Personally, I think Tuchel blows Pochettino and Ten Hag out of the water. You're also weakening a rival as well if you can convince him to leave Chelsea or prize him away from Chelsea. I suspect he's probably unattainable. Chelsea, with the way it's going with the sanctions, I don't see the government allowing them to go bust. I think it's probably in everyone's interest that a buyer does come in sooner rather than later, provided that the buyer, is pretty palatable, really. I don't think the Premier League wants blood money on its hands anymore. There's been enough of that already. There wasn't enough outrage over the takeover of Newcastle earlier in the season. It's taken a war for us to get to this stage, which, frankly, is pretty embarrassing for English football and pretty shameful. So the identity of the buyer of Chelsea is important on that front. But I mean, there were some reports the other day that Tuchel said he's not going anywhere until the end of the season. He was never going to walk away from Chelsea. It would have been too difficult for that to happen anyway. But I think when you look at what he's done at Chelsea and PSG, when you see him, how he comes across in press conferences as well, which you can never underestimate, he's been very statesmanlike at times. He's certainly handled it a lot better than Eddie Howe has at the weekend with the question he was asked about the 81 executions in Saudi Arabia, and he just said he wanted to stick to football. I think Tuchel has handled the situation, given how fraught this has been for Chelsea, very commendably. And he always struck me as a pretty good option for United when I was sitting in on his press conferences when PSG were playing against United 3 years ago, or start of last season as well. He's won the Champions League. He's probably a more in recent years he's been more successful than Pochettino. He's got Chelsea to other finals as well. United would probably be a more stable club than Chelsea, but I still suspect that, given the urgency in which they're trying to sort out Chelsea takeover, that the first thing that the new owner would want to do would be to ensure that Tuchel doesn't go anywhere. All right, Samuel, great to have you with us again. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers. Thank you. That's Samuel Luckhurst there. He's the chief Manchester United writer for the Manchester Evening News, giving us some thoughts on everything but the football tonight. Like, we didn't even get a chance to talk about it. That's how much soap opera there is around Man United at the moment.
Yeah, it does. It just does have the sense of a club that are kind of making it up as they go along. And even the fact that he said there that Jose Mourinho had a plan A and a plan B with regards to qualifying for the Champions League actually seems like pretty good forward planning in the Jose era. So I wonder if they have that under Ranić. I'm not sure.
They must do. There must be, like...
Surely.
Yeah. 11 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Has Eoin booked the Monday off after the All-Ireland final yet, Ger? If Kerry win, I mean, you're doing the show live from the rollover.
Oh yeah, we'll make that a deal. Yeah, sure. As long as it's not counted as a day's annual leave, I'll be up for that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not. Great. And good negotiation there, Eoin.
Yeah.
You're going to be working pissed on Monday morning after the All-Ireland.
Deal. Yeah.
Going viral, baby.
Wow. I really got.
Where would you be? You wouldn't be. Is the All-Ireland final on a Saturday? Am I wrong? This year?
Oh, good question, actually.
I hope it is.
Oh, well, if it is, then that could change things dramatically. Then he could be in a different county altogether. Yeah, the last time Kerry won the All-Ireland, that would not have been a 7:30 in the morning. Would not have been a good time to check in.
Let me just, you talk amongst yourself there while I find out what day of the week the 24th of July is. It's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday, right? Okay.
I thought we'd all agreed 5 o'clock Saturday evening was the perfect time. I mean, that's just
one of those great things from COVID that just
should have kept.
That just left. Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of a bit of a traditionalist. I kind of like the Sunday afternoon All-Ireland final, though I don't mind it at all, because I guess you can enjoy the weekend before it as well. Just prolong the pain and the anxiety.
Oh, as somebody who's always involved?
No, it's as just a neutral observer.
But did you not prefer having the Sunday to lick your wounds last year?
That was a semi-final.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did you? And exactly, that was a Saturday night.
I spent the day looking for my phone.
Yeah, that's not connected though, really.
Well,
that could have happened to you on any Saturday night.
That was a different wound
at any given moment.
It just happened to walk around with one hand.
All right, it's Cheltenham today, the start of it. John Duggan is already at the racecourse. We will talk to him next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The football pod on OTB Sports.
I don't think Dublin are going to be right in time. I think if it was the old season, I would still be very worried about Dublin, but I just can't see them getting right in time for it. Mayo, Kerry, Tyrone.
Who plays Mayo in the final? I told you, the Dubs are timing it for the All-Ireland final.
Get the hop on everyone else and hear the football pod first on the OTB Sports app every Tuesday. For the latest on GAA, rugby, football and much more, download the OTB Sports app, turn on push notifications and hear it here first.
with prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance. Everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, it's 14 minutes past 9. I was listening to a piece yesterday, I won't say where, but there was like every single Cheltenham cliche in the space of about 10 seconds. The Cheltenham roar, the Prestbury Park, the all the stuff. It's like, and I guess it's because the Olympics of National Hunt, I guess it's because there's not that many superlatives left when you're talking about something that happens every year and that year on year always delivers. John Duggan, good morning to you. Your challenge is to shoehorn as many of the cliches as you possibly can into the next 10 minutes.
Well, this is the mecca of jumps racing. This is the National Hunt Olympics, as you say, Ger. And the deafening roar will go up at 1:30 for the Supreme Novices Hurdle when the tapes go up. Don't lose your shirt, folks. You know, it's a long week. Oh, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Is that enough?
Yeah, we're done. Good, a great start. What's it like?
It's dry. That's the first thing. It's cold. It's dry. The ground is drying out. Good to soft ground. A lot of anticipation here. That we're getting back to some semblance of normality. We know what happened 2 years ago with COVID. It shouldn't happen this festival. Then last year is behind closed doors. And just for Rachel Blackmore herself, not to be able to lead in Honeysuckle with all the cheers of the fans, it must have been a very strange feeling for her. And you'd hope that today she can do it in the champion hurdle at 3:30. The horse has never been beaten. And just to see people back enjoying themselves, obviously this is a very sobering aspect to this with the war going on in Ukraine. The last race today is sponsored by the Ukraine Appeal, so there's invitations to the racegoers to donate to the Red Cross. Cheltenham will be doing that as well. So obviously we're thinking about other people who are not having as fortunate a time as ourselves this week. You know?
Yeah, okay, we'll talk a bit more about that later on. Can you just give us a little bit about what else apart from Honeysuckle, because we do a deep dive. Yeah. We love Honeysuckle on this show. What else should people be looking out for today?
Well, it's the return of Gordon Elliott, isn't it? Last year he was serving a band and East Foster had the horses in training here at Cheltenham, and Gordon Elliott's back and he's got a lot of chances in many of the races. I think he's going to have a very good week. I think Willie Mullins is going to have a very good week. It's very much going to be, lads, a continuation, I think, with the fact that it takes a while for any kind of cycles to change. And with 23 out of 28 winners last year, and with bumper horses and good novice hurdlers then become like proper chasers, proper hurdlers, it's hard for the British contingent here to just turn the tide in a year. And I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think there's going to be a lot of Irish-trained winners. And I think that there's a lot of potential stars, even in the first race. You know, you have Kilcrush, Dysart Dynamo. If I'm looking at a horse that's been backed more than anything else this morning, it's Dysart Dynamo for Willie Mullins and Paul Tannant in the first in the Supreme Novices Hurdle at 2-1 now. The Constitution Hill is very well regarded. Mighty Potter. It's going to be an excellent race to start. So a lot of it is about the stars of today, which is Honeysuckle, but also the stars of the future, which you're going to get out of that first race. And in the bumper tomorrow, Facile Vega, Redemption Day, American Mike. These could be the stars of the future that we're talking about as potential champion chasers or Gold Cup horses in the future, you know.
One of the things that you like to do is just to make sure that you're keeping an eye on where the big movers are on the day to see where the money's going. That's generally a sense that somebody somewhere has got good word. But the trouble is that around festivals like this, everybody has word. The Shoeshine Boy is giving you stock tips today.
Yeah, was it Police Squad or Police Academy, or I can't remember the Leslie Nielsen show. Look, you got to trust your own opinion. Like, for example, I read Ruby Walsh in the Examiner and Patrick Mullins in the Indo today, and they both tipped Kilcrush in the first race. There's a family connection with that horse. He was second in the bumper last year. He hasn't run that well so far this season, but I think he could be coming to cherry ripe situation with Kilcrush, but he's drifting in the betting. He's right at 9-1 now. So there you go. So the other horse in the yard, Dysart Dynamo, the man to the stable jockey Paul Tannant, is the one that's getting all the money. You just got to trust your own judgment and your own opinion, I think, in this. 28 races is a lot of races, and I think it's better to be more conservative. And like, for example, the Arkle Chase, the second race today, wouldn't go near it. I think it's too difficult to work out. And then the Boodles Hurdle, anybody getting involved in that race, which is at 10-5, you know, just needs their head examined, because there's 22 runners, and there's a horse at the top of the betting, Gaelic Warrior, that hasn't even run outside of France. but he's just so well regarded in the Willie Mullins yard. They think it's a certainty. But like if you're trying to get a Cheltenham week off to a good start by backing in those races, you're really taking risks. So therefore, I think it's just a case of just being sensible and maybe looking for something later in the week if you don't fancy it today.
I'm not really up to speed on any of the anti-post betting, but the one horse I'd heard about that a friend of mine had put a decent wage on in the anti-post was Gaelic Warrior. So all of a sudden his chances don't seem so secure, John.
Well, I think if you get him at 8-1 or 10-1 each way, absolutely, it's a great bet. But at the moment, I'm looking at 5-2 in the betting, lads, and that's way too short for me. You ought to be maybe, like if they're paying 5 or 6 places for each way, you'd be looking at some of the Gordon Elliott horses. Gordon Elliott's got a good record in this race. Paul Nicholls has got a good record in this race. He's got Bellex 1, if you like the band. They're about 25, 28-1. So, look, it's all about value, and it's not about winners or losers. Of course, if you back a winner at Cheltenham, it does feel good. You can, puff out your chest and strut down the streets of Kerry or Kildare, lads. But, it's just try and get some profit and try and maybe back 1 or 2 and see if you can get ahead.
Yeah, be calm. Use your head.
Yeah.
Don't wade
Use
in.
your head. Don't wade in. Just. And also, for example, Henry de Bromhead's yard has not been in the best of form. He hasn't had any winners in March, right? I'm just going through it here. Some of the statistics about Henry de Bromhead's yard, like 9 winners in October, 13 in November, 8 in December, 4 in January, 7 in February. Last year he won the Champion Hurdle, Champion Chase and Gold Cup. But if Honeysuckle disappoints today, that doesn't really give you much confidence in a Plutar or Manila Indo later in the week, or Put the Kettle On, or even Journey with Me as well. So therefore, you have to be checking the hot yards. I was at Leopardstown last week speaking to Willie Mullins. He had 4 winners on the day. His yard is flying. Gary Moore's yard is doing well in the UK. Nicky Henderson's been a little bit cold. So Henry de Bromhead, it has to be said, has not had the best of seasons. So hopefully his horses are coming into form at the right time. But you just don't know. And if Honeysuckle does disappoint, because I think what will happen with Honeysuckle, if she's going to lose, she'll have to be below her best,
Okay. If you want to see what's drifting in the betting, go to Odds Checker, and the ones that are in blue are shortening and the ones that are in pink are drifting.
That's right.
Okay.
Like Martello Sky is the only other horse that's been backed really in the Maris Hurdle at a price, but the big move this morning is Dysart Dynamo in the opener.
Okay.
But also there'll be about 11 o'clock it'll change again.
Why? What happens then? Is it that's when
just you get a sense of who's worked well, and then you start getting the players involved. The players will start getting involved. The people will harden the markets that have the big money behind them. Will harden the market. I remember Appeton a couple of years ago being heavily backed in the morning, and then Julia Blige in the Champion Hurdle. But just because a horse drifts doesn't mean its chance is gone. It's all about what you see on the day, if you get me.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so what have you got for us today, John?
I'm napping John Bon in the first race. John Bon is a full brother to Duggan, and this is trained by Nicky Henderson and will be ridden by Aidan Coleman for JP McManus. At the moment, John Bon, on OTBSports.com, I've napped him to win only, but you can almost back him each way now because he's drifting out to about 5-1, 11-2. Look, it's all about the future stars, and John Bon could be a future star. He's got a high cruising speed. He doesn't mind a battle. He jumps well. He is a bit temperamental in that he just gets a bit excited, but I don't think Nicky Henderson's too worried about the preliminaries around the paddock. And I think John Bon, if there's going to be a star out of this race, I think it's John Bon. I think that he'll be, whether Kilcrut leads or Dysart Dynamo leads, I think he'll be tucked in behind them. And I think that to reach the frame, he's definitely got a big chance. And John Bon, of all the horses I've been studying over the last few days, was the one I just kind of felt was a horse that I think could be the star of the future. Tony McCoy said that. And I think he might be the one today for the nap. So John Bon is my nap bet at about 9-2, 5-1.
Yeah.
That is in the 130.
It was interesting that McCoy talked about how emotional it would be for JP if this horse won. I'm like, well, I mean, like they've had a lot of good horses over the years, and so they're good judges. But yet at the same time, there's other good horses in that race too. So okay, John Bon's your nap in the first.
Yeah, and it would be emotional if you spent $500,000 on something and it won. So the 10 past 2 is the Arkle Chase. My recommendation is no bet in that race. The 250, I'm gone for Noble Yates at a price of 14-1, 16-1 now. It's drifting a little bit. This horse has been bought for the Grand National by the Whaley Cones. Emmett Mullins trains it. He actually beat Gabinaco over a shorter distance earlier in the season. And then he was second to Ahoy Senior last time out. I think he stays. I think he's got the pace to settle up. If he jumps in a rhythm, I think Noble Yates has got an each way chance. He's my each way bet of the day, about 14-16s in the ultimate handicap chase. In the half 3, the champion hurdle, I'm going for Appreciated against Honeysuckle.
Right.
I am just on the bet on the prices. Look, I want Honeysuckle to win. It's not a pocket talking. I do want Honeysuckle to win. I'm not going to be disappointed if my horse loses that I'm tipping up. But I think Appreciated is the one that could put it up to her. Like Quivega was sent out 5 times by Willie Mullins to win first time out at the festival. So I'm not worried the fact that Appreciated has not been seen since he won the Supreme Novices Hurdle last year by 24 lengths. We heard Sean Flanagan on the Saturday panel talking about the vibes were good. I think he's working well, Appreciated, and we know he was second in that bumper behind Fernie Hollow, and the form of that has very much worked out. The times are pretty much similar to the champion hurdle last year, and if Appreciated improves, and if Honeysuckle is not at her best, Appreciated to 4-1 might be the one to beat her. In the 10 past 4, which is the mare's hurdle, I've gone for the favourite there, Queen's Brook. Once again, strong bumper form, third in that bumper behind Fernie Hollow and Appreciated. Queen's Brook. And Gordon Elliott, I think, is sweet on her chances. The vibes are good once again. Kind of tuned up for this with a performance behind Burning Victory. Queen's Brook has won as a pointer. I think she'll get the trip, and I think that she'll be staying on up the hill better than a lot of these. So Queen's Brook is a win-only bet in the Mare's Hurdle. As I said, don't go near that Boodles Hurdle, that juvenile hurdle, unless you're like Owen's friend on Gaelic Warrior at a good price. But I think Gordon Elliott's got a great record in the race, and he's definitely worth being on the right side of in that one. And in the last race, once again, no recommendation. Vanillier, by the way, has been back, lads, this morning now into 3-1 for Gavin Cromwell. Won at the festival last year. I think Run Wild Fred, the favourite, is a solid favourite. Was second in the Irish Grand National last year, won the Troy 10 chase at Navan. I don't fancy Statler. I don't think Statler will stay. So I do think it's between Run Wild Fred and Vanillier, but I'm not recommending a bet on that one. So the bets today, Queen's Brook and Appreciated to win. Noble Yates each way, and the nap lads is John Band.
Okay. The Guardian today are writing about the Irish takeover, the greening, and how the long-term impact on British racing might be relatively negative because, you know, how do the trainers convince an owner to spend a couple of $100,000 on a horse and many thousands more in training fees if you can't get a winner or even a run at Cheltenham? So part of me is like, well, tough luck. That's just how life works. And part of me is like, well, you know, I understand a little bit about what the point you're making.
Well, I walked around here in 2017 when we had 19 winners. Obviously, nobody was here last year, and I felt I was a punch of 10 lads. And that was a sort of strange feeling to have at a Cheltenham festival, where you come here 2 decades ago and you really felt like an underdog. And if Istabrac won, we'd be all happy for the week. So I do think British racing is facing challenges. Prize money is one thing. And as you said there, like for Tivoli Park Stud or for construction companies to be sending horses to Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott is not a good look for the British owners and for the British trainers. So I think the British trainers can train. It's just that the owners need to have faith in them that they'll keep their horses here. But if you see the success of Willie and Gordon and that they can get these, they've got these contacts in the points field in Ireland and also in the French market. It's hard to kind of swing the tide, but institutionally, British racing needs to up its game, as it were. And we want to see a good, healthy rivalry here. It's become something that the Irish is so important to Cheltenham that they boosted this whole Ireland-England thing. And now it's got to the stage where it's almost like it's now got out of control in a way. And it's got to the stage where they want to be almost playing it down because they don't want to be coming in with a little English flag 5 times a week. Because to be honest, 3-4 decades ago, most of the jockeys were Irish anyway. Most of the horses came from Ireland. They were just sold because our country was so poor. So you'd hope that it's more level playing field. But the more you push a narrative and the more it's going one-sided, the harder it is to change it.
Yeah. All right, John, we leave it there. Happy punting.
All right, lads.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Cheers. More from John, of course, across the day on OTBSports.com and on the radio this evening with Joe. A reminder, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Talking about the League of Ireland, Peter says 3,500 out at Turner's Cross last night. Big Waterford support. That's 4,950, 4,340 and 3,500 in the first 3 home games for Cork City. And obviously, I think you're going to get more on the Friday than you will on the Monday for these games. So They are great attendances.
Yes, I'm going into First Division as well, and to kind of see these massive bases outside of Dublin getting big turnouts is great. And obviously we had this conversation with Vinnie Perth last week about Sligo potentially being, you know, one of the clubs that'll be the envy of the rest of the country, with the exception maybe of Shamrock Rovers, with the new development that'll be happening there as well. There's massive life in the league in other parts of Ireland as well, even though it sometimes feels very Dublin centric.
Dara says, is there a way to get more Mike Ross on OTB? Hugely bright and knowledgeable man explaining the scrum dynamics and tactics. It's a gap in rugby analysis at the moment. And Stephen says the English fans got to the French ref and he decided to calm them with all the scrum penalties, and he did. There is a bit of like, I've sent somebody off in the first minute, now I have to even it up a little bit.
It's only natural. It's subconscious. Twickenham, 80,000 people screaming at you.
Yeah, if we'd lost the game and everybody was coming out afterwards saying the referee was a disgrace, it would definitely seem like sour grapes. It's okay to do it when you win, Razzie. Yeah. One last thing, Tyrone are in crisis, you say?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is as big a story as Dublin were on Sunday. I think Tyrone were pretty poor for a lot of it. Now the thing is, Tyrone were absolutely appalling in a very famous game last year and ended up winning the All-Ireland, so maybe it doesn't matter, but there's a couple of things, like, I mean, discipline is a massive issue for them at the moment. The Hampsey thing on Cormac Costello was silly to say the least, and especially after being black-carded.
And sent off earlier in the season. I see though that he's not going to serve any suspension extra for this.
Yeah,
for a different offence.
Yeah. We've also got like the brawl against Armagh thrown into things, which maybe is just one random flashpoint, but there is a little bit of a trend emerging, certainly if we want to overreact to the first 5 games of the league here, and I'm not kind of sure how they curtailed it over the next little while. Like, we lauded Dublin over the last little while because of how strong their depth was, and while there may not have been a Conor McKenna or a Colin McShane walking away from the Tyrone panel, the depth that they've lost as a result of the players that they have lost, and in fairness, like someone like Tiernan McCann, who played a significant amount last year, like that all adds up to a massive weakening of that squad, especially given we know that Tyrone have form in terms of backing an All-Ireland up. Like, I don't fully buy into historical trends or anything like that.
You keep bringing it up though.
Yeah,
you love bringing it up.
I bring it up all the time.
Slightly buttresses your argument.
No, I bring it up all the time because you constantly bring your nonsense idea.
I didn't bring it up. I live rent free in your head, but it's over.
This is
the argument's
an
over.
Isolated point.
We've all won.
This is an isolated point. The argument is not over. It was
Donal said it.
Once Kerry
they were the team of the decade.
Once the All-Ireland in 2009 was won, and you could tally up how many All-Irelands were won. The argument was done.
I didn't even bring it up.
The argument was done.
Even bring it
That's
up.
usually when this backing things up argument comes up. This is separate. This is the first time I brought it up in isolation of that.
It's not.
It's
not.
It is the first
you brought it up every single performance rankings. We know historically that they're no good. I'm like, oh, how is this relevant to this year? It's just not relevant.
I know, well, like, I mean, it's just interesting though. Like, I mean, how is Mayo's failings of, you know, the 90s and 2000s and the 2010s relevant to this current Mayo team? It's not relevant at all. But if they lose in All Ireland this year, you can be sure as hell that it'll be brought up multiple times. So I'm not saying it's overly relevant, but it's just curious that Tyrone have a record of not backing things up. Tyrone are going to win the All Ireland this year, aren't they? That's what's going to happen here.
I don't know, and that's why it's
doesn't get clipped and it'll be sent back to us on the 25th of July.
Yeah, that is why it's glorious.
Into a pint at 9 a.m.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. I want to tell you about what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. It's a look back with some of the heroes of Wexford's 1956 win, the late greats Art Foley and Ned Wheeler. Dadcast from 3. Your Culture Hall of Fame is Joe Cole, the actor, not the footballer. OTB Gold is Joe Malloy meets Ruby Walsh, and live tonight from 7 o'clock with Champions League updates and much more. It's Joe and the rest on Off the Ball on News Talk, and you can get it right here on OTB Sports Radio. Just tell your smart speaker to play OTB Sports Radio, and away you go. All day long, top quality sports radio content in your earballs. Tomorrow morning on the show, we'll hear more from John Duggan from Cheltenham. Of course, Andy Mitten will give us his reaction to either a spectacularly important staging post on Manchester United's recovery, or an empty victory over an Atletico team who are fading, or a crushing blow to their hopes for the rest of the season. Keith Wood will talk to us about his take on the scrum and preview of the weekend's games as well. And Tommy Walsh joins us as well. So it's going to be a blockbuster show on the eve of St Patrick's Day for you. But here's some more reaction from Jerry Thornley and former Ireland international Fiona Hayes, who joined Joe last night.
Team of us. So we're talking England 15, Ireland 32. Tries from James Lowe, Hugo Keenan, Jack Conan and Finlay Bealham. A record-winning margin at Twickenham for Ireland. There was a win for Scotland in Rome, and then a case of what could have been, I suppose, in Cardiff for Wales. Very happy to bring in Fiona Hayes and Jerry Thornley of the Irish Times. Fiona, you're there?
I'm here. Joe, good to be here.
Never has a record-winning margin at Twickenham been greeted with so much criticism and indifference and crossed arms. So talk to us about this Irish performance.
I wasn't too upset with the performance. I think a big thing for me was obviously the decisions at scrum, and that's been the talk, I think, of everyone since that game. But I was talking to Jerry earlier. I look back at those scrums today. I paused it. I watched the angles, and I think it literally, in the first half especially, Genge hips were absolutely nearly kicking out to the sideline where he was boring in and angling in so much. So I think that upset the whole flow of the game. To come away like they did, they started really well, finished really well, but there was, I think it was something like 17 turnovers in the middle of that, and that is an area that really, really upset people. And I think the English line speed and pressure, we didn't deal with that. We didn't focus. Penalty count was 6 scrum penalties, 1 short arm penalty. So I think that's what got people so riled up. But the scoreline and individual performances at times I thought was really, really good. And to come away from Twickenham with a 17-point win, you would have taken that at the start of the game, definitely.
Jerry, you were there. A lot of people who were there said it was as lively a Twickenham atmosphere for an Ireland game as they can remember. I don't know, maybe to some extent the red card early on seemed to galvanise both team and crowd, and there was almost an embracing of a Mission Impossible style offering on their part, and I don't know, it came through the TV as pretty lively. What was your experience of it?
Yeah, I've never known it louder. I've never known it. It was brilliant. It was a cauldron. I mean, I heard Jonathan O'Callaghan giving out a little bit about it on the radio this morning, saying that, he didn't like the booing of 2 penalties taken by Johnny Sexton, the booing of Irish players going down injured and so forth. But I tell you what, it was fairly lively, and they got behind their team and they celebrated every little moment, and most of those little moments revolved around their scrum, and they hung on into the game. Ireland started brilliantly. I mean, some of the handling early on and the ambition right from the kickoff was superb. The tip on, the tip ins, the wraps, the pullbacks, the lines of running, the timing of passes. It was the ease with which they could get to the outside edges, whether mostly James Lowe, but also Hugo Keenan and on the other side. I thought they started the game superbly. And if Caelan Doris's try isn't overruled for a marginal call for a knock-on against Guy Ringrose when his wrist is tapped by Mauro Itoje, which Matthew Reynal, when he was initially on the pitch, signalled the ball went back and he was perfectly positioned. And no real camera angle showed distinctly whether the ball did go back or forward. It looked like it had gone back. If that try is given and Ireland go 15-0 up, I'm not sure there's much of a way back into the game for England, because then England have to score tries. And that is not this English team's forte, scoring tries. But in any event, the refereeing of the scrums, as much as the actual performance of scrums, like wheeling scrums becoming penalties, first 1, then 2, then 3. It was interesting that Mike Ross reckoned a couple of those penalties should have gone to Ireland. Even Nigel Owens reckoned the penalty count, those scrums could have been 3-3 or 4-2 to England, but certainly a couple should have gone to Ireland. But anyway, it gave England a huge in into the game, and they went to the area of bombardment, and they chased hard and they competed hard. Brilliant though Hugo's balls under the high ball, and they got their way back into the game. And when it got back to 15-all, it got to be really ropey and uncomfortable as it's been in some of the bad days there, like 10 years ago when there was that scrum carnage. And normally when a team is under the pump at scrum time and gives away 6 penalties and the penalty count is 15-8, they lose the match. I thought this game was a huge game in the evolution of this Irish team, Joe, beforehand. I thought with an hour gone, the score 15-all, it had become an even bigger one. Because could you imagine if Ireland had lost that game? I wouldn't like to know what damage it would have done. It would have meant that, it added to the defeat in Paris. It would have meant that the last big win away from home would have been pretty much Twickenham 2018. Given last year they won an empty Rome and an empty Murrayfield. So it would have been a long time since the last significant away win, because they lost in Twickenham before the pandemic as well. So to show the composure they did and come through and win and get a bonus point, I think was hugely significant in this team's development. And I felt more than relief at the end. It was largely relief, I agree with you, but I just thought it was a very important statement win for this team to survive that storm and come through. Wonderful impact from the bench. There was the to have a strength and depth of the bench that has 4 lines really shone through in that game. I know Ian Henderson gave away 3 penalties and his carrying wasn't as strong as it normally is, but I think he'll get better for that game. He'll have to now with James Ryan and Ryan Baird both out next week, because presumably he'll start with Ty Byrne. That's what there was outstanding performance from Ty Byrne and Caelan Doris and Josh van der Fleer as usual. Keenan at the back has never been better. Ireland might well have lost if Keenan not had been so good. It wasn't just his try. It was, you think of that skillful moment when he delays his pass, when Jack Noel goes to the intercept and he shifts the ball onto Gary Ringrose, onto Andrew Conway before it's recycled for the Jack Conan try. I think that was 13 phases. It was probably the best phase of rugby. So Ireland came back and imposed themselves on England again. Like, I was particularly delighted to see Conor Murray come on in the 60-odd minutes. Just, yes, this is made for a player of his experience. 3 World Cups, 3 Lions tours, of 80-odd caps, all that game know-how. Even a little thing like taking a mark, as if to say, right, everybody calm down. Let them shouting, saying all they want, and, swing low to each other. Everybody just calm down and take a mark, and then quickly feed the ball to James Lowe, who was huge in the day. And I just thought they came through moments of crisis with real composure and won well in the end. And ultimately, they passed 2.5 times more than England did. They made 8 line breaks to 1, scored 4 tries to 0. In the end, yes, you can say it was down to England tiring, but I don't think it was that simple, because England have struggled to finish out games against Scotland and Wales before Ireland. And I think, it was the brand of rugby that Ireland played contributed to tiring England out. After all, the penalty that led to the 4th bonus point try was by Joe Marler, hadn't been on the pitch that long, and it was easy not rolling away. So I think I was a bit surprised by some of the criticism. I've never known such a disparity of views on an Irish performance, an Irish win, in all my times as a journalist. But I thought overall I was very pleased with that Irish team that came through. Because, like I said, imagine the consequences if they'd lost.
I think perhaps the disparity of views, Fiona, depends on how much of a disadvantage you think 14 men is for 77 minutes. And also, what is your threshold for turning the ball over when you're trying to play a certain style of play? Because Ireland had 17 turnovers, which is huge. And there is absolutely no doubt that on a number of occasions the pass was forced. And I think some onlookers will think, well, that's just part of the style we're playing. And that's why we're scoring all these tries. That's why we're cutting teams open. And you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggshells and that kind of a thing. Whereas others are looking at it saying, well, this is borderline unprofessional. They're against 14 men. Just go through a few phases. You see what happens when they take England through lots of phases for the Jack Conan try. That was about a 2-minute sequence of play. You eventually, because of the numbers game, you go over. And so Ireland made very hard work at this. I think that maybe is the nub of the issue, perhaps.
Yeah, Ireland had to be a lot more clinical at times. But what people forget is that, you've got a referee that's listening to the crowd, absolutely going mental. They don't know why the red card. Us at home heard it explained perfectly, but you've people in the crowd that probably didn't understand, was that definitely a red card? They're putting a lot of pressure on the referee. There's a lot of noise. England are exceptionally pumped up now. They're down 1 man. So this puts massive pressure on a team playing against someone like that. It went from England talking about how physical they're going to be at the breakdown and how they're going to impose that to Ireland, to an English team, just up and they're thinking they're going to lose a match because they're 1 down. But that brings a lot of pressure onto Ireland. And I think Joe, with that pressure, Ireland saw the space and tried to get there a little bit too soon at times. We had some beautiful pullbacks and that worked well in that first try, but it was almost like we stuck with that same game plan, and Ireland really tried to get a couple of double pullbacks and get that ball out wide. And that English defence, who were a man down, the space was out wide, but their aggression in rushing up really killed the ball, and penalties at scrum time added to that pressure. So it's very, very hard. I think sometimes, and they say this, sometimes when you're down a man, it's actually harder to play against a team like that. You have a game plan, but what you're missing out with that is that, you have a team aggrieved and you have players who are more hungry than they were to start off with.
On the scrum then, let's deal with that issue so you can give us your experience, obviously, of what was going on there. I think everybody has been struck by the post-refereeing review, and even as Jerry mentioned, Nigel Owens was saying it could have been 4-2, maybe it could have been 3-3 for those 6 consecutive penalties. So Matthew Rennell saw what he saw, and England were getting away with what they were getting away with. I suppose the obvious question is, why didn't Tadhg Furlong and Cian Healy turn to the dark arts as well?
Yeah, that's the question that really kind of bothered me, is that they're so, you know, how many caps have they got between them? They're out there, they know the game, they know their stark arts, but they didn't seem to fix that. But I think the issue with that was that there was a double thing going on. So not only was Genge I think angling in on Furlong, I think they were chasing their feet after the hit. And sometimes when that happens, and if you try and fix one, you're getting caught under pressure with two. So there was a lot of dark arts going on there. I was completely flabbergasted in the moment watching it live that Reynal could not see how, especially in the first half, how Genge was scrummaging. It was crazy to me. I think the Irish front row were caught with that as well. But they then decided to maybe take away that hit. And we saw Dan Sheahan getting pinged twice for a short arm and a full penalty because they were cutting that hit and they were probably engaging a little bit too soon. So I think that's the thing that really upset me about that area, that they weren't able to deal with it. I thought maybe they would have gone in at half time. I heard Furlong speaking to Reynal saying, look, they're chasing after the hit. There's no hold. They're not waiting for the ball in. And when they came out, I thought this Ireland team were really going to put a lot of pressure and maybe crab to the left to take away that angle for Genge, but it just didn't seem to happen. And I think Genge probably sorted his discipline out at times in the second half as well. And we saw the English second rows power through. So England looked really, really dominant because they were ending up going forward and on top of Ireland when Reynal was looking at that picture. Because,
Jerry, I don't think Genge or Sinclair would be renowned as world-class scrummagers. You know, that wouldn't be their main weapon, I suppose, on a pitch. Did the Irish camp say anything of note about what had happened in that department afterwards?
No, not really, because we weren't given any of the starting front row rowers or John Fogarty, the scrum coach. All Andy Farrell said afterwards was, no, he's not worried at all. He said, we've got a world-class scrum. And I think what he was doing was putting on a brave front until there's the post-match inquest with World Rugby and Matthew Reynal to see what the outcome of that is. And also, he doesn't want this to become an issue going forward. But that would be my biggest concern, that every opposition coach from Gregor Townsend next weekend to Razi Erasmus at the World Cup pool stages and indeed the All Blacks for the 3 tests next summer will look at that game in Twickenham on Saturday and think, right, this is a very good Irish side, but this is one of the few ways we might be able to hurt them. Their Achilles heel might be their scrum. And there's no doubt that the lack of real depth in the front row is a concern for Ireland. Admittedly, 3 of the starting tight 5 that started out the tournament were gone from the second minute onwards of that game in Twickenham, because you had James Ryan missing as well as Andrew Porter and Ronan Kelleher. But that would be my concern, that Ireland are going to be targeted ferociously hereafter about this. And it's something that I think that becomes even more important element of next week's game, Joe, because Scotland will do the same. And it becomes an issue 2 games running, well, then it is an issue. But very often the case is if the team is particularly weak in one area of the game in one given week, they work at that so assiduously in the ensuing week that they rectify the problems next week. But either way, it's going to be a very, very significant aspect to next week's game. And one other thing, Fiona makes a very good point about the people in the ground being the only people who don't actually know what's going on sometimes. I remember being at a Stamford Bridge match between Chelsea and Arsenal just before the Six Nations started in 2020. When we were on the Six Nations launch, I happened to be lucky enough to be offered a ticket to go to the game. And whenever there's a VAR, the only people who don't know what's going on are the 60, 70 or 80,000 people, wherever it is, the paying customers. Whether they're watching in a pub or watching at home, knows exactly what's going on. I think it was a point Alex Slowe made in the London Times today. And, you know, really rugby should maybe think about, when there's a decision made, putting up on the big screen, get reckless tackle, head-to-head, red card offence. So it gives some explanation to the paying spectators as to what decision has just been made, because it seems daft to me that the paying spectators are the least informed.
So was the replay of the incident not put up on a big screen in the stadium, no?
Yeah, sure it is. But I suppose the replay is, but the explanation you hear from Reynal through the protocols, the lack of mitigating factors, his discussion with Marius Jonker, the TMO, that is not, unless there's a tiny percentage of people that might have a ref link in the ground. Otherwise, I just think it would help if there was an explanation put up on the screen what the decision is and why.
Yeah, generally I agree with you. Now, if anyone needed an explanation about the Charlie Ewels tackle, then we're in bigger trouble than I thought. But I take the general
you know what
point.
I'm saying, though?
Yeah,
That's
the general point, I am. Yeah. But I mean, I don't think anyone who was booing the sending off and had seen the replay, I mean, good luck to you, but you're willfully misunderstanding what happened there. So the booing had nothing to do with not understanding. It was the most obvious red card I think I've seen all championship.
I'd say the Italian one was just as obvious because that's shoulder to head. A lot of rugby supporters might look at that and think, oh, it's just accidental, and not get the bigger picture. The bigger picture is, of course, that James Ryan went off with another concussive. And rugby's been at this now for 5 years. Nearly 5 years since Sonny Bill Williams got red carded in that second test in Wellington against the Lions. And yet there's still debate as to whether there should be red cards or not. And it seems to be more discussion around it this season than there has been in the previous few. And still, tackle heights aren't being lowered. I mean, I don't get it. I agree with you. I think this is a clear day red card, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people watching the Italian-Ireland game, even Irish fans, didn't think that was a red card.
Yeah. We'll circle back to the high tackle situation because it does merit conversation. Just a last one on the scrum, Fiona, then. So Jerry's talking about the Scottish game next week being an interesting litmus test now. So the line has been said over the last 48 hours that this proves that Ireland need more depth in the front row. Part of me is wondering if that's quite true. Like, missing 3 of the tight 5, you're missing your loose head, you're missing your starting hooker. You bring in somebody like Cian Healy, who I presume is not going to have a day like that again. Is this not as bad as it gets? Are we not just fine in terms of depth, or would you have your worries?
I think we're fine in terms of depth. I think this is an Irish thing to do. We panic straight away. I mean, as Jerry said, it's one game and we're going off one referee's interpretation of the laws of scrum. So next week we could be really, really dominant, and this isn't even discussed at all. I'm quite happy. I think the likes of Dan Sheahan, sometimes maybe, and it's more rugby is what he needs. We know we saw him around the pitch. We know what he's doing in the line-out. Maybe it's scrum. It mightn't. We've got Herring, who we know is an absolutely exceptional scrummager, but maybe it's scrum, the likes of Dan Sheehan. So it's the more game time that these guys can get. There's going to be that ongoing debate about Ty Byrne in the second row. Is he strong enough? We didn't question about it when we were beating Wales or other games like that. So I think the depth is there. I think we just need to back the system. And if there's an issue next week, then we have to look at maybe getting bigger second rows in there. But I think anyone that's coming on, and you've guys chomping at the bit. I mean, we would have loved to see Ryan Baird get on, and we'd love to see him playing next week. He's not available, but we have guys that will take a step up, and the more game time they get at that level is what really stands. And I think this Andy Farrell team needs to start getting those guys in there and getting them games.
Yeah. Jerry, would you be worried about depth in the scrum, or do you think this is as bad as it gets and they're unlikely to have a day again like that with personnel that we saw on Saturday?
I think there is a bit of an issue with depth, to be honest, in the front row, particularly in the props, both sides. I mean, look in Paris, like both Andrew Porter and Tyke Fordham played more than 70 minutes. That tells you a lot.
Sure.
And I think that, I think there is, but like I said, and Fiona's agreeing with me, the proof will be next Saturday to a large degree. If it happens 2 weeks in a row, then it really is an issue going forward. If it doesn't happen next week, then that issue's been put to bed, and the narrative can come out of the Irish camp that Matthew Raynal got a few of those decisions wrong, which it looks like he did do.
Yeah, sorry, I do take your Paris point. Actually, I'm not sure if having Tyke Furlong and Porter, Furlong in particular, playing almost 80 minutes is the way to go, especially at a World Cup with lots of games coming thick and fast. That might get Ireland into hot water.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So, on the point of momentum change here, Johnny Sexton said an interesting thing, Fiona. He said we would have lost that game 2 years ago, and I didn't fully know what he meant by that, but maybe Hugo Keenan shed some light on it, because he was saying afterwards that under the sticks at 15 points apiece, he said, I remember Ian Henderson, Jonathan Sexton bringing us together and saying, this is the punch in the face that we've been talking about. It's time to settle. So it does seem as if this team have almost been trying to prepare for these moments where everything's off kilter and finding a way to reset. And clearly they did. What was the big difference between, say, that 20 minutes where England were moving towards 15 points apiece and then the final 20 minutes of the game?
The thing that I saw there was a big momentum change as well is that Ireland were winning those little battles. I remember, you had 67 minutes. We saw that line-out steal where Herring grabbed the ball, settled things down. We had a couple of turnovers that were involved in that. But the biggest thing for me was when Ireland started playing flat on the gain line. They started giving those pops. They were literally trying to hit the ball up. They weren't afraid of that England physicality. They probably had worn the defence down down as such, but they were far more confident. You had the likes of Henderson carrying it in. You had the likes of Conan coming on, making those big carries, and it just seemed to settle them down. They were almost earning the right to get to that wide phase. And then you always have Lowe's Boot, who worked really, really well for us. And you had Andrew Conway with a couple of those 50-22s. So it was almost like they took a breather, they settled down, they earned those yards, they worked really hard. And then you had the luck of the green in a couple of areas as well.
A quote from Eddie Jones, Jerry, which caught my eye. He said, "We want to be an old-fashioned England pack and a new-fashioned England attack." Now, first part, absolutely, we saw that. As for the new-fashioned England attack, look, maybe it's because they're down to 14 men and backs against the wall. I've no idea what this team are really working towards. Like, all the statistics, metres gained, 555 Ireland, 214 England. Ireland had 192 passes. England, to that 192 passes, had 69. Ireland had 143 runs, England 59. And then defenders beaten, Ireland 26, England 7. Ireland 8 clean line breaks to England's 1. On every metric, it bears up what we saw, is that England played about the most basic game plan you could imagine. And then Jones sitting in the press conference afterwards saying we're aspiring to old-fashioned England pack and new-fashioned England attack. What are your thoughts on what's going on here with this team? Because it doesn't make much sense.
Well, yeah, I remember, I might even said in the show last week, I certainly wrote it last week, that this still looked to me like old England v new Ireland. And that's the reason why I'm so chuffed that Ireland did win this game, because they're playing a brand of rugby that is risky, but it's high risk, high reward. And it's probably the most enjoyable brand of rugby that we've ever seen from an Irish team, like period, ever. We're not seeing anything like the same from England. There's nothing like the same variety of options for the ball carrier. It's supposedly just unstructured. He regards what Ireland do as very structured, as very, very interesting, but very structured, as how he put it, where England after 3 phases, it just doesn't matter the number on your back. And they did get wide a couple of times. That time that Joe Marchant threw out that pass that was about 4 metres forward to Sam Simmons that Mike contrived to miss. But by and large, it was scrum dominance, take 3 points and put the ball in the air and chase hard. And maybe go to the corner for a couple of mauls, which the Irish maul defence was excellent. Whereas in the past, that might have been England's route to victory, as well as a scrum, the mauls in the corner. In terms of their attacking game, if you take out Italy, against Scotland, Wales and Ireland, they scored 2 tries in 3 matches. Once from a bit of Marcus Smith individualism off a line-out maul that was motoring forward, and once through cramping the space and nudging Adam Baird off the ball against Wales to get an overthrow for Alex Dunbrand to score. I can't remember really any occasion in the entire 3 matches where any of their centres or any of their outside 3 players have even looked like scoring try. I think he's pulling the wool over their eyes, to be honest. And all this tiresome talk at the World Cup. Look, he's undoubtedly a past master at getting teams to World Cups and performing very well there. He's helped South Africa, Australia and Japan all in the past, and England. Look, his record is there, but this new England attacking game, no, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Fiona, if he didn't have the admittedly phenomenal previous World Cup record to fall back on here, there would be nothing to suggest this plan is coming together right now.
No, and it's like this New England. I think he's picked out New England players. You see, like I'm watching the Premiership and I see Randall, and we know what Marcus Smith can bring. I thought Marchant actually had a really good game against Ireland as well. But in general, it's like the players, but I just don't know what they're playing, what type of system. It's not exciting brand of rugby, other than Marcus Smith taking it upon himself. Like I've watched Harry Randall and he is one of the most exciting 9s to break through, but I just don't see it with England. It's like he's structured, he's putting in the box. We have him box kicking. The ball isn't getting out wide. They're using their forwards, but we haven't seen any of this backline that's meant to be exciting. And Freddie Stewart's another player who lights it up, but we haven't seen anything with him handball in hand being exciting at times either.
Jerry, in terms of what we might have learned about selection, Conor Murray very much justified his position on the bench. I was asking about that last week and wondering at times, do we need tempo? And certainly we saw his composure and that was important. Robbie Henshaw probably comes back into an Irish starting 15 given the impact he made on the game potentially. What about around this area of second row and back row now? Let's assume and hope for a second that James Ryan makes a speedy recovery. I know he's out for the Scotland game, but just with a view to the medium term, let's presume he's available for the purposes of this conversation. There is a sense that Caelan Doris is better at 8. And equally, we saw Jack Conan do a very fine job. When he came on, Peter O'Mahony probably less effective. So where are we now in this Ian Henderson, Tadhg Beirne, James Ryan back row equation?
Well, it's been interesting because Tadhg Beirne has been an ever-present for Ireland this season, and he hasn't played 1 minute in the back row, Joe.
Yeah.
Regarded, strictly speaking, as a lock. He started every game in the lock, at lock, and in the All Blacks game, he came on for the last 30-odd minutes in the second row as well. So that doesn't seem to be an option they're exploring at the minute.
I guess Ian Henderson's injury for a portion of this championship, though, may be a deciding factor there.
Yeah, well, it's certainly speaking in the short term for next week, because James Ryan is out and Ryan Bair's out, is almost certainly going to be a Tadhg Beirne, Ian Henderson second row. You would imagine with Kieran Treadwell as backup. That's you'd imagine the way they're going to go for next week. And then we'll have to wait and see till the All Blacks tour will reveal more. They're thinking about Beirne as an option at 6 with a more beefed up second row. But Beirne's gone brilliantly in the second row so far, so I'm not sure they're about to change from there.
What about Doris versus Conan? Is Doris so much better at 8 as to almost say, well, we have to have this guy in as 8? I mean, geez, Jack Conan hasn't done much wrong over the last 18 months, has he?
No, he hasn't, but he had a relatively quieter game in Paris. He was hooked off after about 52, 53 minutes and then was put on the bench against Italy. Now, if you look back at the Italian selections, all the other selections, you could say they were injury-related because some players were coming back, or they wanted to have a look at Michael Larry at fullback because Hugo Keane had played 18 games in a row. The one selection where there was no real look into the future or anything that was injury-related was the new back row with Peter O'Mahony starting at 6 and Jack staying the bench and Caelan Doris moving to 8. Because, with a player like Doris, he is going to get more involvements on the ball at 8 because he's not coming around to the blind side, the scrum or whatever. It's just the way of the world that the number 8 gets the ball in hands more often. And that's when Doris does his most brilliant work. I mean, he's not far off world class in my view. And I think he would have gone the Lions tour, but for his own concussions issues last week. So it's a nice headache to have. There are going to be times when maybe he or Conan will be injured. And so therefore you've got an option at 8, you've got an option at 6 going back to the Leinster back row. I think it's quite fluid, and you're really going to have a case where all of them are the fit and available. If they are, I still think James Ryan is nailed on starting second row, and probably with Tadhg Beirne, and it might be that they will go back to Doris at 6 and Conan at 8 and Van der Fleer at 7, as Leinster have done for much of this season. But it'll partly be based on form as well. I don't think there's a hard and fast ruling at this moment in time.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.